Welcome back to Pynchon Pals, a podcast about finally reading Thomas Pynchon. My name is Patrick Furley, and I'm joined, as always, by Andrew Tillett.
Good afternoon, Patrick.
And Dury Long.
Hello.
Yeah, you should have said good morning. On tonight's episode, we are discussing chapters 5 and 6 of Thomas Pynchon's V, a book we are all reading for the first time. I should mention at the start here, we are recording officially in the season of the Pinch. Happy Pynchon season. One battle after another is out. Give it up. I've seen it. I'm the only one on this podcast who has seen it, unless you have, Andrew, in the meantime.
No, I want to try and see it this weekend, though.
It's worth seeing. I think maybe on the next episode, when more of us have seen it, we will discuss some thoughts. But I am here to say, obviously, this is coming out. The movie will have been out for a long while by the time you are hearing this. But I recommend it. I'm a big fan of PTA, Paul Thomas Anderson. Enjoyed this movie. I have no idea exactly how much of a Pynchon adaptation it really is. It said inspired by in the end credits, so I assume our boy Thomas is in there somewhere. But exactly how faithful an adaptation, you will have to wait, like 3 to 5 years until we get to Vineland before we have that conversation.
You said you're a big fan of PTA, Paul Thomas Anderson. What are your thoughts on parent-teacher associations? I
do not have a child, but I could see myself being an extremely annoying PTA member in when that time comes into my life. I think I would definitely be the person who would really like to circle back to some of the premises we're operating on when we make a decision like this about, school lunches or carrying. I guess there's a difference between the PTA and the school board, and these are the kind of things they teach you when you have a child in the school system.
I hope to attend as few PTA and school board meetings as parentally possible.
I think PTA is big on fundraising for stuff, like the carnival. Did you have a carnival
sure. Collective action. We're all about it.
There's collective action in this chapter.
Yes. So we're starting off with what is it? Chapter 5, in which Stencil nearly goes west with an alligator.
I was thrilled that the alligators came back up in a more tangible form.
Yeah, we get serious alligator action. Or do we? There's a question, I suppose, we could ask about whether or not the alligator we encounter here is really an alligator. Or perhaps a different character in disguise.
I was wondering that.
Not to jump ahead. Would you all like a little chapter summary?
Yes.
I would love one.
All right. We rejoin Benny alongside Angel in the sewers, hunting a pale pinto gator that keeps giving him the slip. He's been at it for a couple of weeks now, in the employ of Seuss, a true believer in the Alligator Patrol, who's constantly up against it with the city government. The foreman, Bung, smells that Angel has been drinking on patrol during a check-in, and Angel bites him on the leg and runs off. Benny is alone, wandering through Faring's Parish, named for a sewer legend, a priest in the 1930s who believed rats would inherit the earth and so descended into the sewers to convert them to Roman Catholicism. He kept extensive journals documenting his successes and failures, including his interspecies affair with one Veronica. Quote, the only member of his flock, Father Faring, felt to have a soul worth saving. Try saying that 5 times fast. Benny corners the alligator in Faring's tomb, apologizes, and shoots. Elsewhere, Holesick crewmates Gouverneur Rooney Winsome, executive of the Musique Concrète label Outlandish Records, is lounging in his apartment with Mafia, his wife, a prolific and popular romance author with a grand theory of human nature, and Charisma, who wanders the floors draped in a big green blanket. It's midnight. Rachel calls, looking for Paula and or Stencil, who Charisma thinks is chasing a lead down in the sewers. Foo shows up at Rachel's place with who else but Pig Bodine, who's looking for Paula too. They drink and converse until Stencil calls, asking them to come pick him up from a coffee shop. Having ingratiated himself with Seuss earlier that day on a hunch that V was known to hang around the sewers of Paris before the Great War, Stencil pursues the priest's mistress, a.k.a. Veronica, a.k.a. V, into the parish, where he was shot in the rear. The whole sick crew piles into a Plymouth and heads to the Rusty Spoon in Greenwich Village. And that's the end of the chapter. So we're picking back up on our boy Benny. It's been too long.
He's hunting an alligator.
I'll say.
I learned some interesting information about the New York City sewers when I was digging into this chapter. They just a tidbit. They say on the maybe third page of the chapter that they were working in teams of 2 to hunt these alligators. I'll just read a brief passage here. Seuss was aware that most hunters regard use of this particular shotgun they were using like anglers feel about dynamiting fish, but he was not looking for write-ups in field and stream. Repeaters were quick and sure. The department had developed a passion for honesty following the Great Sewer Scandal of 1955. So I got interested in what indeed was the Great Sewer Scandal of 1955, and as it turns out, it was a real event. There is a New York Times article. If you look it up, it comes up as like a New York Times archival article from June 10th, 1955. It was kind of a convoluted story involving like corruption and maybe like a 2-mile long sewer line that was built in Queens by these 5 individuals. But they were later convicted because the sewer that they built was faulty. And I think it seems like there was some corruption involved in terms of like using taxpayer dollars to build like a faulty sewer.
In New York City?
In New York City. Anyways, that was the Great Sewer Scandal of 1955. It was a real event, even if these alligators perhaps are somewhat less real.
That seems like the kind of scandal that sounds capital G great for a book set in 1956. I'm not sure a book written in 2025 would refer to it as the Great Sewer Scandal, but perhaps just a lowercase s sewer scandal.
I'm curious if Pynchon read about the sewer scandal for some reason and then was inspired to go down this road with the alligators, or if he had this vision for the sewer and the alligators and went searching for a great sewer scandal.
True. Pynchon, I guess he does so much research. Do we think he went into the sewers at any point? He talks a lot about pipe diameters.
He does talk a lot about pipe diameters. Part of this reminds me, an author who has gone on the record a number of times talking about how influential Pynchon's work was to his own writing is William Gibson of Neuromancer, who is kind of figured as one of the progenitors of the cyberpunk kind of literary moment. And interestingly enough, if you listen to Gibson talk about inventing net runners who use these electrodes on their head to plug into cyberspace, and there's data encryption, and the hackers are trying to break the ice that blocks whatever the data they're trying to steal is. And you listen to Gibson talk about these things, and he freely admits that he had no idea how computers worked when he was writing this stuff. He was kind of making it up as he went along, playing jazz a little bit with imagery and with sort of synesthetic renderings of highly technical things in order to turn it into a good story. And so I do wonder to what extent Thomas Pynchon thinks what would be an interesting way to render a sewer system versus I'm going to go into the New York City library and find some sewer schematics buried in there to find out what the most common pipe diameters are.
Yeah, I guess there's a good or there's a fine line between, I guess, writing something accurately and writing something to what you think the reader is looking for, right? You, I guess, can do all this research to know exactly what the standard New York City sewer pipe is, or you can, as a person who's lived in the world, have an idea about what this sewer is, and if you assume most people have a similar idea, you can sort of write to that, and then 99.99% of people will think you're totally accurate.
Unless you get a plumber reading your book. Write to an angry letter.
They didn't have Goodreads when this was published, so that wasn't
That's
as much
so
of a
true,
problem.
yeah. I thought I would check in our best buddy J. Cary Grant's companion to V. I don't know anything about J. Cary Grant, but I assume he's probably a stand-up fella. Shout out to J. Cary Grant. And the entry on the Great Sewer Scandal of 1955 does mention, in fact, this same New York Times headline that you just mentioned, Dury. So congratulations for conducting the same level of thorough research as the author of this book.
Thank you.
It also mentions that the trial lasted almost 14 months and was then the longest criminal trial in the nation's history. So I guess it is entirely possible that if you were like an avid reader, especially of like the New York Times or something, you may have come across, just by being someone keeping up with the news, you may have seen a headline of like longest criminal trial in history. This great New York City sewer scandal.
You imagine just reading the New York Times every day and seeing like a 1-paragraph updates on this trial that will not end.
And I was kind of expecting it to be like a slightly more juicy story, given the capitalization of the Great Sewer Scandal and the length of the trial. But there really wasn't that much meat to like sink your teeth into.
Although it was a criminal trial.
It was a criminal trial. There was corruption. There was a faulty sewer line.
We've seen Chinatown. There's a lot that goes on with, water supplies. And this is the basis of hard-boiled detective stuff in film noir.
It's no great molasses flood, right? As far as capital G great events, no molasses flood.
So we're in the sewers. They are of a certain diameter. There may have been some scandals in the past of these very sewers, but this fella Zytsus, he wears a shark skin suit and horn-rimmed glasses. He sort of positions himself as like a champion of the working man and like really tries to look out for his employees in the alligator patrol.
Can I ask what a shark skin suit is?
I think it's just like a type of fabric that we
it's not like actual shark skin.
No, it's according to Wikipedia, it could also be called grisé from the French meaning gray. It's just like a dark twill weave suit that I think was particularly popular in like the 50s and early 60s, and then kind of fell out of fashion.
Gotcha.
But it looks like shark skin. Like I think it has that sort of rough kind of shiny looking texture. But yeah, Zytsus is an interesting fellow. I appreciated that he like really tries to turn this into a bit of a technological outfit. Like he tries to give all of the teams walkie-talkies and like has them check in this kind of command center that he has set up with I'm imagining Pynchon writes about these sort of clear whiteboard type things that they have like a big map of the city on. And I'm just imagining, the scenes of the Rebel base in the original Star Wars movies where they have all those translucent sort of World War II era screens that they're writing on and tracking lasers, except of course they are tracking alligators through the sewers of New York until they get in trouble with the FCC for all of the sort of foul language that they use over their walkie-talkies. And then they don't have walkie-talkies anymore.
You get confiscated.
Then they run into budget issues and they're just walking around on the street with a clipboard. I mean, how the mighty have fallen.
You do kind of feel for this guy. He has a dream and he wants to treat his employees well, even though he is sort of sending them into the sewer to shoot alligators, but he wants that to be the best possible experience.
I appreciate his enthusiasm. He's really trying to bring like motivation and pizzazz to this difficult job.
He wants to do it right. I mean, he goes on to say, I guess it's important to know that it says that he definitely wishes that he was a union organizer, but he goes on to give this kind of powerful speech, I think. Like, I think if you're on the street in front of a candy shop about to descend for your 8-hour alligator hunting shift, that this speech would probably hit really well. But, he gives them the out. He says, you can go find a new job, and if it pays better, like, good on you. But, right now we're doing the best we can with what we've got.
Yeah, he gives them such a good speech that Pynchon writes, they, like, feel bad for him because they're looking at this as, like, yeah, this is quite possibly the worst job in the city, and it's really great that you feel strongly about it, and we clearly matter a lot to you, but none of us going down there have the same sort of energy about this that you do, boss man.
Yeah, and they kind of describe Seuss's crew as just sort of a group of bums. Like Pynchon goes into this sort of lengthy description of where everyone has come from. It's sort of this diverse group, that has kind of landed in New York City via a wide variety of different pathways. And yeah, they describe a weird collection it was, bums, mostly bums. And they say Seuss himself is kind of a bum also, but dressed up in this suit and sort of performing this role.
Yeah, bums become a sort of recurring figure in these chapters of sort of people who don't have anywhere else to go, but who are here for one reason or another. And specifically, they are here as the city and as the post-war economy sort of booms and grows around them, and yet here all of these people are sort of watching the overpasses get built over top of their heads as the city expands.
So after we get this sort of exposure to Seuss and his sort of band of alligator hunters, we then descend below the street, under the street, with Benny Profane and Angel, who are hunting what they believe to be an alligator that is sort of swimming in front of them. But Angel's kind of drunk as they're hunting this alligator.
What else is new?
Per usual, he's a little wine drunk. And Profane is worried that Bung the foreman, great name, by the way, Bung the foreman is going to be upset
which is
with him.
a nautical term, I think, for like a stopper in a hole, like in a barrel, but also, sort of refers to other kinds of holes and things that come out of them.
This line really cracked me up. They said he, meaning Bung, didn't talk much except to give orders. One phrase he used always, I'm the foreman. Sometimes, I'm Bung, the foreman.
Yeah, he's this great sort of middle manager type guy who kind of carries himself with a little bit of the self-importance of Seuss, but with none of the inspiring qualities such as they are of Seuss. He's just sort of walks around with his clipboard, checks in on the people who are down under the street, and asserts himself as having power over them before moving on, which gets Angel's goat.
Yeah, so they check in at like every manhole, and they get to the next manhole, and Angel sort of pops up to give Bung a report, and Bung quickly figures out that Angel is drunk on the job and says that, he's going to write him up. And then Angel does something wild.
He bites him on the leg. This is the second biting we've gotten in this book.
Yes.
So far.
If we think back to Ploy, the sort of rear end biter from the sailor's grave.
It's possible that people just bit each other more often in the 50s. I don't know.
Who's to say? We also have sort of like I wrote down like Ploy or an alligator. So like they're kind of in the sewer. They seem to have like some sympathies that they're developing with these alligators, as well as the rats in the sewer. They keep saying that they let some rats go because they feel sorry for them. Profane is sort of having like a moral crisis over whether to kill this alligator or not. He feels sort of like a kinship with the alligator. So I don't know if Angel is taking on a little bit of Ploy here, or if he's taking on a little bit of the persona of the creatures that he is chasing through the sewer.
Yeah, and we'll get to this a little later on in the next chapter, but there is a young woman whose teeth are described as like sharp and ready to bite down on whatever soft part is offered to them. So we get a lot of this like teeth and biting and chomping imagery here. And that is a thing that, having also encountered it in parts of the Crying of Lot 49 and in the movie Inherent Vice, Pynchon has a thing with teeth and dentists, shall we say. And in that Vulture article that I mentioned in the first episode, some of the recollections of folks who knew him mentioned that he was always extremely self-conscious about his teeth growing up as an adolescent and even when he was in the Navy. So this sort of dental fixation, I think, is something that will keep cropping up as we continue.
So Bung and Angel get into a full-blown fist fight at street level, and Profane is once again, I guess not once again, for the first time on his own hunting the alligator.
Yeah, so the way this normally works is that you've got one guy with the gun out front, and then you have another guy with a flashlight behind him. So you have a team of two, sort of a shooter and a spotter, hunting these alligators. But even before this, Angel was not exactly doing a great job on this particular shift, just sort of swinging the flashlight around. But now Benny is down by himself with the shotgun.
And the alligator sort of leads him through a sort of circuitous route, but leads him into this area of the sewer called Faring's Parish.
Who wants to give the full rundown on Father Faring?
I will take it upon myself. So
I thought you'd be excited by Father Faring.
Let me put it this way. There's a lot of things I don't agree with Father Faring on. I think he maybe took a couple of missteps in maybe a few in his long and storied life. But Father Faring was a priest, as I mentioned up at the top, back in the 30s, who became convinced that the rats were going to inherit the earth. That humanity...
Please. Yeah. The squeak will inherit the earth.
That's
maybe more of a mouse joke.
Now, I want to be clear. Pynchon did not write that. As genius as that line was, listener, you should know that was an Andrew Tillett original. And I'm sad I didn't think of it first. So he's convinced that these rats, like when humanity is gone, as it clearly seems like it's on a heading towards, these rats underneath the street are going to be the ones who will to rise up to the surface. And for that reason, they need to have a relationship with God. They need to accept Jesus as their Lord and Savior. They need to begin their walk with Christ as soon as possible. And so he goes down with, as Pynchon writes, a Baltimore catechism, which I looked up is sort of a introductory catechism that was mainly used for early childhood, Catholic education.
Or early rats.
Or early rat Catholic education has a lot of sort of question and answer type stuff in it. He also brought, for reasons nobody found out, Pynchon writes, a copy of Knight's Modern Seamanship. And, this relates to our sort of naval themes throughout this, but also our companion to V notes that it could be a reference to this book on seamanship that Marlowe finds in Heart of Darkness.
Knight's Modern Seamanship is a real book. I mean, I guess we know that.
I did not know that. Okay.
It's incredibly long. It's got 1 million editions because they had to update it every time a new boat came out, basically. But it does have chapters such as rope and anchors. So it really takes you, I think, from sort of level 0 to level 100 on.
Hell yeah. And if you're completing your Pynchon collection, no collection is complete without a circa 1930s edition of Knight's Modern Seamanship, I suppose. So he goes down there and founds what becomes Faring's Parish, somewhere between Lexington and the East River, between 86th and 79th Streets. I'm not incredibly familiar with the geography of New York City, but perhaps if you are, you yourself can make a pilgrimage to this very spot and think about what that means for you.
Although we don't necessarily condone descending into the sewer, just to be clear.
Yeah, that's not on Pynchon Pals, if that is something that you decide to do. So he, funnily enough, sort of blesses the water coming in through the what do you call those things?
Sewer?
Yeah, he blesses the sewer water. I thought there was a more technical term that I was reaching for, but clearly I have not done Thomas Pynchon's research. And he sleeps on his cassock with a breviary for a pillow. And then we get, sort of in a stencil-esque fashion, we get some excerpts from this journal that he keeps, that Pynchon writes.
Before we go that far, Patrick, we've got some recipes for the cookbook.
I was concerned with this development.
Go ahead, yeah.
It goes full how to eat fried worms on these rats. It's, I guess, if anyone hasn't read these chapters, it's important to note that on top of baptizing and teaching these rats about God, he does eat one of them at every meal.
3 rats a day. 3 square rats a day.
Especially, I think, the kind of mouthy ones. But we do get some light recipes on how best to cook different parts of the rat.
Indeed. The livers, he wrote, are particularly succulent. So unfortunately, our Pynchon cookbook may have to include some roasted rat liver.
I think they mentioned boiling the tails as well.
They do also mention boiling the tails. That's true.
That sounds worse.
So Fearing imagines that there's a kind of reciprocality going on here. Yes, he will eat 3 of his flock every day, but for the ones he's not eating, and maybe even for the ones he is eating, they will, have their reward in the hereafter, in the coming kingdom. And he has these conversations, which he describes in these journals, with several of the rats, including rats named Bartholomew and Teresa. There is a particularly pugnacious rat named Ignatius, who he gets in some philosophical discussions with.
A regular Martin Luther coming after the indulgences.
Yeah, they have a discussion about the superabundant satisfaction of the Blessed Virgin Mary and of the saints. And Ignatius asks, what does that exactly mean? And Fearing replies, that which they gained during their lifetime but did not need, and which the church applies to their fellow members of the communion of saints. Aha, crowed Ignatius, then I cannot see how this differs from Marxist communism, which you told us is godless, to each according to his needs, from each according to his abilities. And then Fearing, I tried to explain that there were different sorts of communism, and that goes on from here, until he meets this one particular rat, kind of the only one who he believes is worth saving. All of the other rats keep trying to degenerate the church's teachings into a kind of base communistic approach to living where things are shared among the brotherhood and the sisterhood, all except good old Veronica.
V,
as he calls her in his journals. He writes stuff like, V came to me tonight, upset. She and Paul have been at it again. The weight of guilt is so heavy on the child. She almost sees it as a huge white lumbering beast pursuing her, wanting to devour her. We discussed Satan and his wiles for several hours. And then V, much like a different V we have met in the past, intends to become a nun, and Fearing is faced with the awkward position of having to write the bishop that a rat would like to join the sisterhood, and he tries to puzzle out exactly how he could make that case in the best possible way.
Imagine my surprise to find out that V is in fact a rat.
A lot of V can be a lot of things, as we're learning. V can be
a lot of things as we're learning, but I was sitting here wondering, and I was like, is this the aha? Is V a rat? Is that what we've learned?
V is a priest's mistress, in a way. Throughout all of this, Profane is wandering through these catacombs and coming across etchings of Bible verses and, shoddily thrown together crucifixes, and he kind of muses for a little bit on this aspect of fictionality that Pynchon is really interested in. Pynchon writes, the stories, by the time Profane heard them, were pretty much apocryphal and more fantasy than the record itself warranted. At no point in the 20 or so years the legend had been handed on did it occur to anyone to question the old priest's sanity. It is this way with sewer stories. They just are. Truth or falsity don't apply. Which just stuck out to me as in a book that is clearly about sort of layerings of stories and mythologizing. We see Angel and Benny and Geronimo mythologizing their own profession and telling this exact story about the sewer priest later on in another chapter. But it all kind of resolves to this aspect of Benny that I think we're getting to now, which is, as Pynchon writes, he was sentimental and superstitious. Like, this is a guy who kind of really wants to believe in things as they are told to him, even when they clearly don't make a lot of sense as told.
Are we skipping over the fact that the priest had sort of a sexual relationship with V?
Oh yeah, was that not implied by my summary?
Just wanted to make sure that was clear to the listeners.
We should really hit this point. The priest, and I want to be clear, this is the part that I do not agree with. I think this was an ethical, moral misstep, undeserving of his office and his vestments. The priest fucks a rat.
And that is why this podcast is explicitly rated.
Because we give it to you straight, as Pynchon does here.
There's an interesting little callback, I think, here as we kind of leave this reverie about the rats and return to Benny Profane. There's an interesting callback to our sort of running theme of inanimacy when he sort of rounds the corner and ends up in this sort of space that's sort of lit with phosphorescent light. I feel like there's a lot of glowing happening in this novel, where we keep walking down streets that have sort of like a green glow coming into glowing areas.
The mercury lights that are lining the streets that Benny is always walking down.
Yeah, so we're back in another sort of like phosphorescent glowing space. It says an uncomfortable radiance. And in this space, Benny shoots the alligator. And he says, or thinks, I guess before he shoots the alligator, he thinks the alligator's heart would tick on, his own would burst, main spring and escapement rust in this shin-deep sewage in this unholy light. And so we again have this idea of inanimacy, this sort of like heart being almost like a clock where it's sort of ticking whereas his is sort of rusting or bursting in some way.
Yeah, and he wants to let the alligator go, but he knows that Bung the foreman knows that the gator is down there. They've got too much information. It would look bad for him. So he, kind of like a clock or a piece of machinery, like has a function that he has to perform at this juncture. And so poor Benny like apologizes to the alligator before shooting it.
And this alligator, I think, because we might call back to this in a little bit, it does display some interesting behaviors as Benny is chasing it. At one point, the alligator is described as burbling in the sewage, blowing bubbles, and growling gently. Is it saying anything? Benny wondered, to me. And then when he ends up shooting the alligator, he says the alligator jerked, did a backflip, thrashed briefly, and was still. And then blood began to seep out amoeba-like to form shifting patterns with the weak glow of the water. So I'll just leave that there, and we can return back to this alligator, quote unquote, in a little bit.
Yeah, we sort of circle back again with this idea of like animals talking to this like Pentecostal thing that keeps showing up, or animals speaking, or people speaking in tongues, where during the Pentecost was the as Wikipedia describes it, the descent of the Holy Spirit upon the apostles of Jesus, Mary, and the other followers of Christ, while they were in Jerusalem celebrating the Feast of Weeks, as described in the Acts of the Apostles. And part of the thing that happens there is that there's this wind that takes up everything, and suddenly people are speaking in other tongues as the Spirit gave them utterance. And so this idea of speaking unnaturally, or animals speaking like humans, or inanimate things speaking sort of in proper language seems to be a thing that we are returning to over and over. What do we think about the apocalypticism of our rat priest here, Father Faring?
I feel like there might be something going on with he was sort of predicting the fall of humanity, the rise of the rats. We have this sort of above the street, under the street connection. The folks under the street are starting to identify with the rats. I feel like we see some sort of rat-like individuals above the street. Above the street,
the Great Depression is raging on. The economy is collapsing. Also, the world is still reeling from the First World War.
Oh, in the 30s.
Yeah, in the 30s.
In the 30s. Okay, I was thinking about some rat-like creatures in the present day of the book. But yes. So I think there's maybe something happening there. I'm not sure exactly what it is.
There's several things that come up about the Depression in these chapters. Benny later on, we'll get to it, wears a suit that is sort of from the 1930s and feels nostalgic because that's when he was born, and sings some Depression era songs at one point. So it clearly seems like this is something that Pynchon is working through in these chapters, or people being driven out of society by the failures of people at the very top of society.
Well, and even in 1955, 56 is when the book takes place.
Yeah.
We still have this band of bums who is sort of patrolling the sewers. So the problems of the Great Depression have not entirely gone away with the years.
I mean, the reason they're down there is they're hunting these alligators that are a product of sort of a return to monetary stability, right? You don't buy pet alligators for your kids if Macy's doesn't exist, and Macy's doesn't exist if there's no post-war economic boom. So I guess in a way, it's kind of circular, right? The priest was driven into the sewers from a lack of resources, and Profane is driven into the sewers through extreme overabundance.
Yeah, and it's at once the place where the waste of humanity and society literally goes, but they're also purifying it in a way, and they're there to clean out the undesirable elements from the undesirable place, and that includes these rats that this weird priest attempted to turn into God's perfect subjects. Tried and failed to do, I should say. And of course, he himself is a failure and an abuser of power.
So do we want to leave Benny in the sewer?
Yes.
Let's do it.
So we go into section 2 of this chapter. I did not remember this character. Did we meet him before?
We get his name in, I guess, at the end of the house party that Rachel has. There's a note left by Paula that she and Winsome and Fu
and Charisma
are going to see McClintock's Sphere at the jazz club.
They're the proper nouns. Okay, that I was like, where did we meet this fella before? We're suddenly talking about this whole different crew.
Yeah, we do not get with the same whole sick crew, but a different subset of it. I think it's funny that we have not seen. They're called the whole sick crew, but they never actually all seem to be in the same place at the same time. They are never quite whole in that way.
It's a lot of schedules to coordinate. Some of these guys have real professional jobs.
Some of these guys have real professional jobs, and others are the laziest human beings in Nueva York.
It's a vibe. The whole sick crew.
Yeah. So we enter section 2 here in the middle of a late era Steely Dan song where this fellow Rooney Winsome is sitting on his quote grotesque espresso machine, smoking string, aka marijuana, and casting baleful looks at the girl in the next room, who is his very well-off wife, Mafia, and she's playing with an inflatable brazier, playing with her cat and dangling it like a toy.
And she's
speaking
naked.
She is naked. Speaking of the house party, this is a throwback. this is an exact shot-for-shot remake of Stencil looking at Rachel lying on the floor.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
Minus the cat.
Yeah, so it seems
like... It's kind of like an odd little bit.
It is an odd little bit. It is not immediately revealed, but like soon enough, it seems like this could be, there's like an espresso machine, people are half dressed. Is this in the morning? And no, it's sort of the middle of the night that all of this is happening, as effectively 80% of the book that we've read so far takes place in the middle of the night. This kind of continues that theme. There's this other fellow here, Charisma, who is wandering around enshrouded in a big green blanket.
Okay. We got to talk about Charisma. Do you guys...
Who I thought until this chapter was a woman because of Charisma Carpenter, star of Buffy and Angel, shout out. But Charisma is a man in this novel.
Do you two remember the Dr. Seuss book, There's a Wocket in My Pocket?
I can't say I do.
I've heard the name, but I got to admit it's been a while.
Okay, well, I hope this is more meaningful to our listeners because I thought it would resound with the two of you. So the Wocket in the Pocket, it's rhymey, but there's...
Oh, is it?
Sort of the scary page of There's a Wocket in My Pocket is the Zug under the rug. And I don't remember the exact passage, but it's something like, da-da-da, there's a Zug under the rug. I don't go in there. However, this seems to be...
Charisma's vibe?
No. It is an example of the Mandela effect.
Okay.
Because everyone on Reddit agrees with me that it is the Zug under the rug. But apparently in every text version anyone can find, it's the Vug under the rug.
I was just seeing that. I just Googled the image.
And so this does not hit with you two because you do not remember this book from your childhoods.
No, the Mandela effect clearly erased this memory from me completely.
This is a major talking point in the
Seuss community.
In the Seuss community. I mean, there's been a lot of changes to Dr. Seuss books over the years, and that sort of flares up on talk news regularly, but to change Zug to Vug.
But it has always been Vug.
It's unclear to me. It seems everyone agrees that it is Zug, and everyone who looks at their copy seems to find different. Like, people online are comparing copies together and finding lots of changes, like character, like as if, sort of Game of Telephone, lots of little things have changed in this book for no apparent reason over the years. So I suspect there's a Zug copy somewhere. And if you read the Wikipedia page, it mentions that Dr. Seuss originally wrote Ugh with 2 U's, and the typist
keeps going
made
deeper.
It to a Vug. So if there's already an Ugh and a Vug, if anyone listening can find me a Zug copy, pynchonpals@gmail.com.
But said Ugh, Vug, or Zug reminds you of Charisma.
Yes. I mean, he's under the rug. So.
Sort of lurking about,
getting in the shower. Winsome starts to wonder if he sort of like shuffles off into the shower and he can hear a bunch of splashing sounds. And Winsome is not totally clear that he's remembered to remove the blanket once he gets into the shower.
He sort of crawls through Mafia's room and squeezes her on the leg as he goes by. Very Zug.
Yeah, a Vug would never.
No, the Vugs don't do that.
So we learn a bit about these characters and their professions.
Yeah,
they're
weird characters.
Rooney is an executive for Outlandish Records.
Yeah, which seems to be... So I used the phrase musique concrète to describe this earlier, which is like an avant-garde experimental kind of musical style that came around in the mid and early 20th century, which was basically, we're not going to make music out of recording instruments. We're going to make music out of recording sounds, generally. Natural sounds, man-made sounds. We're just going to record stuff and put it out on records and like make those into musical compositions. So you get a lot of avant-garde sort of composers making this kind of experiment. Folks are coming up with laboratories where they are gathering a bunch of different sound making implements and apparatuses. You get early experiments in even synthesized sound making from stuff like this. And of course, you also get people who go out into the wild, so to speak, and record sounds, which it seems is the approach that Rooney here tends to do.
That is helpful context to know, because Rooney is described as just like walking around and like taping things, everything ranging from like the ladies' room with like a tape recorder to like a Yankees game. And he's like recording all these different sounds in different places.
Yeah, releasing things like Volkswagens in hi-fi, presumably meaning they're just recordings of the car engines that are put out on a hi-fi record.
What a whole sick crew thing to do.
I mean, I'm sure you can find records like this if you dig through the when you go in a record store and they have those like $1 scratched up record bins underneath the records that people actually want to buy. There's probably stuff like this in there. Sound effect records, all sorts of stuff.
You see this, I mean, I've seen this online before. You see like the World War II fighter planes recorded and like train, like different locomotive engines and stuff. Like there's I guess a market. Was there a market? I find it hard to believe, but I guess before YouTube, you couldn't look up what a P-52 sounded like, so you had to buy the record.
I suspect that Winsome's money is coming from elsewhere besides this record business.
But we're going to talk more about that. Don't worry.
Yeah, we'll talk where at least where some of this money is coming from. But I do think this sort of stuff crosses the line between extremely commercial in terms of like this is where sound effect libraries kind of come from that you use in movie making or in radio dramas or whatever. You know, the Wilhelm scream, for example, or these sound effects that you've heard hundreds and hundreds of times across a bunch of movies. You know, a lot of them emerge from this moment in recording technology where people are going out there and just recording sounds of things and then modulating them for use in other projects. But there is also this avant-garde or sort of like art world tradition to all of this that seems to be a little bit more of the space that Outlandish Records is operating in. There's not so much of an implication that these are that these Volkswagens are going to be used in like a Hollywood picture so much as it is that, you know, the fact that they're in hi-fi implies that someone with a really nice sound system wants to be able to listen to this, just like they want to be able to listen to, you know, as you said, Dury, the stuff that Winsome is able to record by disguising a tape recorder as like a Kotex dispenser.
Does this feel sexual?
Room. Yeah, it feels super sexual.
It reminds me of Rachel and her car, to be perfectly honest. Like her fondling her car and like having this whole conversation with her car. It's like they're recording all these sounds of cars or other inanimate objects, or recording sounds from the Kotex dispenser in the ladies' room. Feels like very much this relationship with inanimate objects, or inanimate objects are making music in some way.
Rooney goes so far, it says, to have reached out to the U.S. Air Force about nuking Moscow so that he can use it as the ending of a recording for Tchaikovsky's 1812 Overture. Yeah,
which
he gets in some trouble with the CIA for.
In a very funny...
They come by. They don't arrest them. They just ask.
In a very funny back and forth that I just want to read. It seemed Winsome had been putting out feelers among higher echelon personnel in Strategic Air Command. Why? Said the CIA man in a gray suit. Why not? Said Winsome. Why? Said the CIA man in a blue suit. Winsome told them. My God, they said, blanching in unison. So at the very least, you know, he's able to sell the idea to some extent. And I think this moves us a little bit into these sort of questions of the military entertainment industrial technology complex that Pynchon will return to in some of the later works that we're reading, as far as I'm aware. But a bit of it is definitely here. And we see Winsome later on, again, not to jump too far ahead, but creepily hanging out in a tree recording like a gang fight going on in a extremely voyeuristic kind of mode of operation. This book very much seems to be about people seeing or listening in where other people don't know that they are seeing or listening into things. You want to
talk about Mafia's profession?
Let's talk about Mafia.
Mafia is a very well-selling romance author. She writes true tomes, it seems. I think they're listed as 1,000-pagers, and they mostly revolve around her capital T theory of capital H, capital L, heroic love. Patrick, what is heroic love?
Heroic love, as far as Winsome understands it, refers to screwing 5 or 6 times a day.
Every day.
Every day.
But also seems kind of racist.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Well, the novels are racist. The heroic love thing, she's just using the racism to explain heroic love.
Gotcha.
Yeah, the novels are illustrative of this concept of heroic love, but Winsome notes that they keep seeming to rely on a lot of stock racial stereotypes. You know, the Jewish characters are always a certain type of character, the black characters are always a certain type of character, and the sort of heroic, loving heroes always tend to be, as Pynchon writes, Anglo-Saxon, Teutonic, and or Scandinavian. And yet, she has attracted, on the grounds of these novels, a really rabid fan base, a little bit of a kind of stan culture analogy here. So this comes up in Grant's companion to V, and I've seen it floated elsewhere, and seems to be a kind of understood consensus about this character. But many people seem to think that she is based on an actual person who wrote 1,000-page novels featuring romances between extremely white characters espousing a kind of grand theory of humanity.
Who could that be?
So many people have said that this is an Ayn Rand analog here, that this is Thomas Pynchon poking holes in the argument and tropes employed by, sort of the famed objectivist author, a kind of a doctrine of radical selfishness and egotism that if you look out for yourself at the expense of all other sort of aspects of humanity, survival of the fittest, kind of social Darwinism, you will become the fullest expression of humanity. And, you express that through being a captain of industry or, not listening to what the naysayers or the communists or the minority interest groups would tell you about, running a business and captaining your own destiny.
Is Fountainhead sexy? I've never read any of Rand.
I last read Rand in middle school, as many people. There are dozens of us. And I don't think the Fountainhead is especially sexy as far as I remember, but Atlas Shrugged is predicated on this kind of heroic, egotistical sort of love story between two of its protagonists, as far as I recall.
Good to know.
Yeah, no Pynchon collection is complete without also, in addition to reading Modern Seamanship, going out and buying a copy of Atlas Shrugged.
Look, if you've got a bookshelf big enough to support Gravity's Rainbow, Atlas Shrugged, it'll hold the weight of both, I bet.
Yeah, there you go.
So in this same passage, we get that Winsome is from North Carolina. This is a pro-North Carolina podcast, I would say. Where do you guys think Winsome is from, specifically? And if you guys want a second, I can explain where I think he's from and why.
So it comes up that he's from North Carolina because he thinks that his wife Mafia's brand of anti-black racism carries with it an inauthentic energy to his own brand of anti-black racism that is revealed through the kinds of racist jokes she makes, but also, the emotions that Mafia has surrounding black folks and minorities. But as a sort of Southern, let's not say gentleman, this is something that Winsome believes he understands better than these coastal elites, these Yankees.
Give me a city, Patrick.
Is this coming from the text, or do you just have...
well, coming from the text, where do you think he's from in North Carolina? You know, okay. North Carolina guys.
That's true.
I think he's from Wilmington.
Wilmington, interesting.
Because he's kind of artsy.
Sure.
But he's artsy in a way that you can tell he has money, but I think he thinks that he lived rough. So Wilmington.
Right. So not kind of like a...
He didn't... Right. Like his parents clearly have some money. You don't make it to New York to run a obscure record label without having a little family dough to get you going. But if you're going to be artsy like this, I think he thinks that he is from like the quote unquote wrong side of the tracks, but he's from an affluent neighborhood.
Right. So not necessarily tobacco magnate.
Right. Yeah. Somewhere kind of in the middle, like upper middle class.
Interesting. I could see that. Dury, do you have any thoughts on this North Carolina representative? As the one person on this podcast not from North Carolina, but with experience about North Carolina, in North Carolina.
I don't have anything to say to the contradiction of Wilmington.
Yeah, I was going to say, I do think this feels like sort of tobacco family type thing. But I will admit, I am not so familiar outside of tobacco and peanuts and cotton, sort of what the economic stratification was in North Carolina in, I guess, how Winsome seems a little older than some of the other whole sick crew. So he's
got to be 20s or 30s.
20s.
He does describe his brand of racism as, quote, an inheritance you lived with, which might track with the narrative of a certain type of land owning
gentry
family.
Yeah. So Thomas Pynchon. It's always great to. What's that meme of blank mentioned? This is sort of like a North Carolina mentioned moment, and there's like the anime figure holding up like a thing of cheer wine, but it is not an especially cheery portrait of North Carolina.
Yeah, unfortunately, North Carolina is not painted in the best light in this particular paragraph.
No, I would not. I wouldn't say so.
Returning to Mafia, there was one other thing I kind of wanted to highlight about her, which is that Winsome sort of reflects a little bit on how Mafia at one time wanted to have children, and he speculates that she selected him as a partner because he, quote, apparently met her specifications, both genetic and eugenic. And I just wanted to highlight that because we've already kind of talked a little bit about eugenicism in our discussion of Schoenmaker's plastic surgery practice.
Mm-hmm.
So we've kind of got that now coming up again as perhaps a recurrent theme with some of these characters.
Yeah, and of course this is written in the early 60s. It takes place in the mid 50s. So the war and the legacy of Nazism, let's say, is I think alive and well in a lot of Pynchon's fiction, and the legacy of eugenics and the intersection of what we think of as Nazi eugenics programs and American imperialism. And that is something that I think we've seen crop up several times here, probably will crop up again as we go forward.
I'm kind of wondering how well Mafia gets along with the rest of the whole sick crew.
I feel like she doesn't come around. I feel like we get that Mafia wasn't on that going out list.
That's true.
That's true, yeah. Winsome goes out to go to the jazz club.
Maybe she was hanging at home with her cat.
Or she was working on her very successful books.
With her cat.
With her cat, in the nude.
That sounds about right, given what we know about her thus far.
She's not in the nude, I guess, by this point in the chapter.
Yeah, she puts on a robe,
right?
Please, Patrick.
His wife was putting on a peignoir, kimono, housecoat, or negligee. He didn't know the difference, though periodically Mafia tried to explain to him.
I thought that was a good line.
That was a good line. Also feels this is one of those things of like, I don't know, Pynchon just going through a thesaurus for negligee or whatever and writing down every word that he can come up with. Or maybe he is just like an avowed fan of, ladies' nightgowns. Who could say?
We also get this section where, or right towards the end, kind of, Winsome debates cheating on Mafia because the only way to get divorced in New York is for infidelity to occur, and he thinks about cheating on her preemptively because he believes that she's going to cheat on him. And he tells us how much he likes Paola.
Yeah, and Paola becomes sort of the subject of the next part of this chapter. As we go towards the end. Duri, did you have something to say?
I was just going to highlight, for the sake of our next podcast episode, that Charisma around this time was in the bathroom, still wrapped in his blanket, observing his teeth in the mirror. He says, eigenvalue, he mumbles. I could do a better root canal job. What is my buddy Winsome paying you for anyway? And there is no sort of further discussion of this at this stage, but I just wanted to call that out because I was like, what on earth is he talking about? What is eigenvalue? Who is eigenvalue? And that does come up later.
So you're saying you've read ahead.
I did. I mean, I didn't have to read very far ahead. I had to read about one word ahead of what we were doing today.
Admitted on air, shamelessly.
Sorry.
So an eigenvector is a sort of mathematical structure that defines a space. So you have like multiple eigenvalues at right angles define your like plane or your.
Andrew, I took linear algebra.
I didn't take linear algebra, and I'm going to bet that many of our listeners also did not take linear algebra, so keep going, Andrew.
But the dentist named eigenvalue who fixes your eigenvector teeth because they're all at right angles.
Oh.
This is a good pun.
This is I only know this word from the scene in Spider-Man 2 when Peter gives up being Spider-Man and he goes to his physics class, and his teacher, who Dr. Connors, who later becomes the Lizard, asks him what is the eigenvalue when like tau equals 0 or something, and Peter gets the right answer. So I mean, that could be a Pynchon reference in and of itself. This is also not the first time we've seen eigenvalue. When it sounded familiar to me, and way back in when is this chapter 2, when we first meet Stencil, and he's sitting on the sink. There's a line in here that says, "Until such a time, there were Schoenmacher to wait for, and Chicklets the munitions king, and Eigenvalue the physician, epithets characteristically stemming from Sidney's day, though Sidney had known neither of the men personally to fill up the time."
Okay, I had forgotten about that. I need to like keep a little bit of a character log going here. I keep losing these names. I'm like, who is Charisma?
That's why we're making this podcast. So you don't have to, or so you can do it on your own at home and have a more fleshed out conception of the book. So,
Speaking of Stencil,
Rachel calls. She's looking for Stencil and Paola. She doesn't know where any of them are. She's specifically looking for her roommate, the young one. And Winsome doesn't know where either of them are. Mafia doesn't either. And it's Charisma who's like, I think Stencil left a note the other day that he was doing something in the sewers, like chasing down a lead on V. Which I think is really funny that they're all just like, this is a casual sort of thing that one of their buds just is on this globe-trotting hunt that none of the rest of them understand or...
Yeah, he's in the sewers this week, you know.
Yeah, he's
in with this group because they all have odd little things they're doing, right?
They all have odd little things. It's kind of,
Fergus is always doing electrolysis, and Stencil's always talking about someone named V who no one knows who she is.
And Winsome's off, recording a fighter jet.
Yeah. Honestly, are the whole sick crew good, actually? Putting aside all of the sort of like eugenics theorization.
If we just put that aside, they're an interesting bunch.
Bracketing their politics and their personalities, they really have a sort of radically accepting kind of friendship. except for the fact that they mostly dislike each other. So I think there's like a really beautiful moment here that once again reminds me of this cinematic approach that I think Pynchon takes with transitioning from character to character, where Winsome and Rachel are talking on the phone and they're talking about the sewers. None of us, Winsome told her, have ever inquired into his business. If he wants to grouse around the sewer system, why let him? I doubt Paula is with him. Paula, Rachel said, is a very sick girl. She hung up angry, but not at Winsome, and turned to see Esther sneaky peeting out the door wearing Rachel's white leather raincoat, which, first of all, friggin' Esther once again.
You know,
but second of all,
just can't catch a break.
That little movement of we're in the room with Winsome and they're talking on the phone and we kind of cut to Rachel and then suddenly we are following Rachel now for the rest of this chapter as if the scene just cuts on the telephone hanging up. I think it's just like a really wonderful piece of writing that feels so naturalistic that it's a real blink and you miss it transition of perspective that is really indicative of the kind of often subtle techniques that make Pynchon's novels work. And we've seen it this happen a couple of other times, like at the party back in the first chapter, but I liked it here.
It was good for sure.
Yeah, Rachel has a little bit of a reverie that she goes into, as she so often does, where she kind of imagines confronting Esther about, you know, taking her coat, and then Esther like speaking back up to her when she asks her where she's going. I mean, she does confront her about the coat, but then she like goes another step further and is imagining what would happen if the conversation escalated. And she sort of imagines Esther getting hysterical. They're getting in this big fight. She like kicks her out a little bit, and then she's sort of imagining the worst case scenario here and imagines that, you know, the next day she would read in the paper where Esther Harvitz, 22, honors graduate of CCNY, had taken a Brodie off some bridge, overpass, or high building, which was a reference I looked up to Steve Brodie, who jumped from the Brooklyn Bridge and survived in 1855.
Shout out to Steve Brodie,
wow.
I guess.
Yeah,
and
so she goes into this like...
that sounds more of like a feat of strength and not just sort of like a random happening. So I'm going to assume Steve Brodie was a diver and not just a poor soul.
You know, the note that I wrote down here does not make that immediately clear.
Did he survive and like was totally okay, or survived and was like horribly mangled?
Let's see here.
Google. Yeah, Steve Brodie, bridge jumper. I think Thomas Pynchon misspelled this because I am seeing Steve Brodie Brodie, and this is Brody.
That is correct.
Head back to the library, Tom. You got some work to do. Yeah, so he was a professional bridge jumper. People just used to be doing fun feats back in the day, and the bridge jumping, like flagpole sitting. Andrew, you and I talked a lot in college.
I know you were going to bring up flagpole sitting, Patrick. You can't go one day without talking about flagpole sitting.
I love flagpole sitting. One of the greatest cultural moments this country has ever produced. This was a fad back in the 20s after World War I, where people did endurance tests by sitting on top of flagpoles for dozens of hours at a time, even days at a time. And I think we had something going for us back then.
I really did not realize that this man jumped off multiple bridges. My quick search did not reveal that.
Dury.
Yeah, this was like a profession for him. He was a bridge jumper.
I guess you don't get a slang term for jumping off a bridge named after you if it just sort of happens one time.
One bridge. Although that seems to be what she's...
You're the first person to ever do it.
Yeah, that's true.
That seems to be what she's referring to with Esther.
Yes, although of course she is imagining this as a suicide attempt and not Esther takes a turn into being
a professional
bridge jumper. We should be clear. Yeah, I like that Rachel starts speaking to herself in sort of like a faux Freudian psychologist, like Viennese accent. It says, so, she continued in a Viennese dialect, this is what we call repressed hostility. You secretly want to kill your roommate or something. She's like psychoanalyzing herself for talking to herself about how much she wants her roommate to die, which
Rachel
I find
is just like constantly lost in her head.
It's because that's the kind of education you get at Bennington.
Analysis was too big in the 1950s. I don't know if I mentioned to you that this past July I did my J.D. Salinger summer.
Sure.
But he didn't write that much, so it only took like a month to read it all. But
unlike Pynchon Pals, we'll be here a while.
Pynchon Pals, every single character in a J.D. Salinger book is constantly talking about analysis, and I'm over it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that Rachel has an analyst. We very well may meet Rachel's analyst somewhere in this book. I wouldn't put it past it.
Analysis definitely, I feel like, continues to come up in this book.
Oh,
I feel like it has been mentioned in the past.
You are just a foreshadower tonight, huh?
I just suspect. I suspect.
One?
Yeah, I believe it.
I think it came up the first time in the, like, when we meet Rachel and we're talking about her, like, living in Long Island.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
I promise I have not read that far ahead.
Knock,
I just
knock,
had
knock.
some recent travel.
Who's
knock,
there?
knock. Who's that at the door?
Who? Is it Foo? Is that you?
It's Foo, but also look who it is. Creak, open up the door. It's Pig Bodine.
Pig Bodine.
Pig Bodine, this Neanderthal wearing the uniform of a third-class boatswain's mate in the U.S. Navy.
Yeah, he's just there in his, in his whites. He throws his hat onto the desk lamp and scores a ringer. It says, which I find very funny.
And we learn a new acronym that the whole sit crew uses. MySaw, which is crew talk for make yourself at home. Kind of like hags. Have a great summer. Make yourself at home.
I like
hags?
this. Have a great summer.
Have a great summer. You ever had hags written in your yearbook?
I went to high school with like 10 people, Dury. We didn't write things in yearbooks.
Okay, fine. Well, I feel like that was the
your
thing.
yearbook was a piece of tree bark. I want to start using this in my life. I want to start telling my good friends, MySah. MYSAH.
I feel like every crew has to have some acronyms.
Yeah.
I'm curious if we'll learn any more, if there's any other crew talk.
Well, so, I mean, this is something that I do think happens, documented linguistically, that happens in and shortly after wartime, is that soldiers come back and they have acronyms for things, and then those slip into the vernacular of kind of the American public. So this is where we get, like, obviously we all know what AWOL means, even if you do not know that it actually stands for absent without official leave. You know what it means to go AWOL. Or we know
FUBAR.
Yeah, we know what FUBAR means, even if you don't know that it is like fucked up beyond all recognition, which I think...
One of my good friends in high school had an early electric car that the license plate was FUBAR.
I feel like the state should have caught that one as being vulgar, but that's beside the point.
I think they might have spelled it with a PH to get around
that's pretty good.
State censorship.
So I do think you see this kind of hyper acronymization happening at certain times in American history, post World War II, post Vietnam with, FUBAR, and the popularity of war themed movies and TV definitely speaks to this as well. I'm trying to think what we've gotten in sort of the 21st century related to this. Like,
I was coming up with other acronyms, but not military related. We have a lot of like acronyms in our vernacular.
Yeah,
now.
The internet sort of
texting culture
goes into this well in a big way. I guess we have like IEDs, but that doesn't really describe any kind of social phenomenon. That's just like
that's just a
weapon.
That's just a weapon. A type of thing in the world. Anyways, I do think it's funny that we get this Make Yourself at Home acronym. Pig has been hanging down at the Rusty Spoon, and they love him down at the Rusty Spoon. He's been picking up all sorts of things, like talking about Jean-Paul Sartre. He endears himself just a little bit to Rachel by asking, "What do you think of Sartre's thesis that we are all impersonating an identity?" Which did not surprise her. After all, he had been hanging around the spoon. For the next hour, they talked proper nouns. And so this is the intellectual posturing, the sort of bohemian proper noun speak is the thing that kind of gets them to open up just a little bit as Pig and Foo are pounding the beer that is in Rachel's fridge.
And then we learn a surprising revelation about our good friend Stencil.
Cue the SVU.
Dun dun.
Undone.
Dun 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 dun.
Stencil calls them.
At 1:30, the phone rang. It was Stencil. Stencil's just been shot at, he said. And I have annotated here next to that line in my book in pencil. Stencil equals alligator ?
Okay, so there's an interesting textual clue if we roll it back a little bit.
Roll it back. Rewind the tape.
Roll it back.
We skipped it. We skipped it on purpose, though, because I didn't say anything. I can't find the page now, though. It was right at the end of section 1. So we talked a little bit in the first episode about the difference between a schlemiel and a schlemazel, right? Patrick, you said the schlemiel is the person who spills the soup, and the schlemazel is who gets soup spilled on them.
I'm so impressed that you said that, Andrew. That was so many S's.
Right before the passage about Constitution Hall in section 1, there's the passage, schlemiel, he whispered into the phosphorescence, accident-prone, schlemazel. So, the schlemiel, Benny, is shooting our good accident-prone friend, Stencil.
Interesting.
Yeah. There seems to be some healthy debate about this. I will say that J. Cary Grant of A Companion to V, which I've been mentioning a lot in this episode that does not really have a ton of external references compared to our last chapters.
Except for the bridge jumper and the great sewer scandal of 1955.
That's true. Well, bridge jumper, he probably says something about that as well. Anyways, he does not think that this is actually a case of Benny shooting Stencil and thinks that this is a commentary on that Pynchon is making on coincidentality, and he specifically refers to the fact that Stencil says that he dodges a second shot, whereas Benny only fires the gun once. But I'm not sure that I totally buy this.
I mean, how funny is it that, like, Stencil, on the pretense of hunting down V, has gone into the sewers, but we know that V was a rat. So Stencil ostensibly is like hunting down the solution to this grand mystery conspiracy that he's been following for years now. And it's led him to this like legend of like a rat priest in the sewers of New York. And like the thought of him dressed up like an alligator, like calling back to like how we were describing the alligator earlier, like burbling in the sewer in like an alligator outfit, and then getting shot by Benny. It's just very funny.
Yeah, I couldn't figure out if he was actually disguised as an alligator or not. Or
he's
if he's
wearing his like waterproof suit. And we do get the description of the alligator as black and white.
Yeah, so I feel like Pynchon, this is a much funnier scene if Benny is shooting and like also having this kind of philosophical conversation with Stencil, who is waiting around in the sewers, because they also don't know each other as far as we know. I mean, maybe they've run into each other before, but they haven't interacted actually in the book as of yet. I think this is a funnier scene if we put 2 and 2 together.
Also just the idea of like Stencil leading Benny on sort of this wild goose chase.
Just waddling around the sewers.
Yeah, like they're going around the sewers for quite some time, like down different bins and turns. And at one point, like Benny describes the alligator as almost like wanting him to catch it. Like it's not running off down like a difficult turn or like moving too fast. So yeah, I like the idea that this is Stencil. It also like fits with Stencil's personality. Like this guy is so wrapped up in his conspiracy that I can completely believe that he would in fact dress up like an alligator and like lurk in the sewers to like spy on someone based exclusively on like a sort of urban legend of a rat named V.
Well, we do
It's
know
his
also
improvisation.
Yeah,
right? Like,
his
we know that
forcible
he does
dislocation of personality.
He's doing something Stencil would not normally do, get shot in the ass.
Yeah, it's true. And so Stencil calls them from I thought this line was funny, from a Hungarian coffee shop on York Avenue known as Hungarian Coffee Shop, and asks for them to come pick him up because his butt is very sore. Dury and I just watched the Billy Wilder movie starring Audrey Hepburn, Sabrina, from 1954. And it features a subplot where a man sits on champagne glasses and spends a good half of the movie nursing his extremely sore butt. And I thought about that as I was as I was reading this section.
That's such a good point. Yeah, and at the end of that movie, another person sits on a olive jar. Yeah,
so there's just there's sore butts bespeckled with shrapnel just going around in the mid-50s there. Let's see, do we learn anything else towards the end of this? He and Xenophobia in another sort of intersection kind of hit it off. This is where he's sort of interested in the sewers, and he comes across these folks who, as the narrator says, thinking through Stencil's thought process, they looked like ragged files of workmen lined up on the sidewalk opposite and being harangued by Xenophobia. Any organized body fascinated him, especially irregulars. These looked like revolutionaries. Because Stencil is just attracted to weird collections of people and situations that look like they could boil over at any moment, something he presumably inherits from his father. And so he starts chatting them up, and they initially think that he is coming to work for them, Xenophobia does, but then they end up having a nice conversation about this weird sewer priest, and Stencil gets the idea, like, did you say there's someone named V in these journals?
It describes her as a priest's mistress who wanted to become a nun, referred to by her initial in the journal. So he, at this point, doesn't even realize that she's a rat.
But he does know that there was an earlier V in the journals who did want to become a nun.
But he's like thinking this is a human.
Yeah.
This is a very funny character.
Poor Stencil. There's a weird sentence in here that... persuasive and charming even in a wrinkled suit and nascent beard, trying not to betray any excitement, Stencil talked his way downstairs, meaning into the sewer, but had found them waiting. And where to go from here? He'd seen all he wanted to see of Faring's parish. And this, like, he had found them waiting, sort of really puzzled me. I was sure I was, like, reading something or missing something wrong as I read through this the first time. The companion to V thinks that it's, like, kind of a royal them, like a conspiratorial them of, like, he had found them waiting down in the sewer.
It could be the rat.
Could be the rats. But it's just a sentence that I thought I would flag for our dear listeners in case that also came across to them as, like, I'm not really sure who the them is being referred to here.
We also learn one more Yiddish term in the last sentence of this chapter.
Mm-hmm.
Rachel is talking to Stencil, and she says, "I'll bet your ass is sore." She said it through long eyelashes and a little girl grin, and for 10 seconds or so, Stencil felt like the altar cocker Rachel may have thought he was. I don't know that I pronounced that correctly.
As far as I know, yeah.
But it means an old, cranky man who is out of touch with the times.
Yes. Perhaps.
I just thought I'd highlight that because of our other terms, schlemiel,
schlemazel,
have come back up.
Yeah.
So we might see this one again also.
Yeah, and we should say again that, like, Pynchon is using a lot of, like, Yiddish terms and Jewish characters, although he himself was not raised Jewish and is not sort of, like, born from a Jewish family, but perhaps growing up on Long Island and having a bunch of, like, Jewish connections and friends, perhaps just through cultural osmosis, maybe through the Navy, who knows. This is clearly something that he is interested in. He's interested in Judaism kind of like as a theme, and also in these very particular Yiddish expressions that we get here. Specifically, alter cocker means, like, old shitter, or is something like old fart, old fogey. And yeah, so we know that Stencil feels old hanging out with these people, which is something we mentioned, something that surprised us when we first met him, that like, wait a second, he's much older than everyone else in this room. Yeah. But it's interesting that this is something he frets about, and specifically frets about in relation to Rachel. Shall we perhaps take a break and then return for chapter 6?
Let's do it.
All right. We will be right back.
Sit down, weary traveler. I am not what you seek. Join me in a meal to hear of my repentance.
We didn't really talk about this when it came up, but I do want you guys to know about this guy. This like Dashiell Hammett guy that gets referenced at one point.
Oh, we can talk about Dashiell Hammett. I've read Dashiell Hammett. He's great.
Do you know what he did outside of being an author?
He was like an actual private eye, right?
He started as a Pinkerton, but like in the like union busting phase, not the like doing research phase. He was then an ambulance driver in World War I. Interwar, he wrote his noirs. World War II happens. He re-enlists in the army in his mid-40s to become like a cryptologist in Alaska. And then he just kept getting drug in front of the like House Anti-American Committee because he was a commie.
Yeah, Dashiell Hammett is a real one. Shout out.
I had no idea.
You should read his Continental Op stories are really good.
Continental Op? Like OP?
Yeah, OP. So this is just part of the podcast now. What am I trying to say? So he has a bunch of novels that I've not actually read, but I've read a bunch of his Continental Op stories. And the Continental Op stories are basically about an operative for like the Continental Detective Agency. So it's basically based off of his experience with the Pinkertons. And it's
Who were the Pinkertons?
They were like a large private eye company in the 1800s. And then when that sort of phased away, they became like professional strike breakers for mega corporations.
Yeah, private muscle to like break unions and strikes. But they were started by a guy named Pinkerton who tried to convince Abraham Lincoln to start up like a national espionage agency. Like he basically tried to invent the CIA and the FBI at the same time during the Civil War, and wrote like an autobiography. I did like a AP US history project where I went all through like Pinkerton's like primary correspondence with Lincoln.
You wrote a DBQ about it?
I did like a DBQ about Pinkerton, and interesting, weird guy. Obviously led to some nasty stuff. But Dashiell Hammett. It's great. Continental Op. He's like a weird schlubby, like hard-boiled detective, not like a suave, smooth operator, but kind of like the folks that we see in chapter 3 here, just like a guy who's like solidly built and looks like he could rough some people up, but is getting kind of old for it at this point, and he goes in and solves weird, violent mysteries.
Reminds me of some folks.
I just also, since you brought up Dashiell Hammett, you're not going to believe this, but the first sentence of the Maltese Falcon, and one Pynchon commentator, Richter, apparently, comments that this might be a reference on Pynchon's part. Maltese Falcon opens, Samuel Spade's jaw was long and bony, his chin a cutting V under the more flexible V of his mouth.
A V?
His nostrils curved back to make another smaller V. The V motif was picked up again by his thickish brows rising outward from twin creases above a hooked nose.
So many V's.
So many V's. So little time.
Apparently they read V and V for Vendetta. I didn't know this. Like, it's in the movie. They're like holding a copy at one point.
That makes sense. I haven't read that book since I read Ayn Rand in middle school, so I should go back to V for Vendetta. We're basically just back in the podcast. Welcome back, everyone. This was our return to the podcast. We are here with chapter 6, in which Profane returns to street level. Would y'all like a synopsis?
Boy, howdy.
Yes, please.
Benny is having lots of thoughts about women. Angel and Geronimo take him out for drinking and sex after his first night of alligator hunting, awkwardly inviting Josefina along. Benny tries to keep up with the Spanish using the little Italian he knows. He gets plastered, but what worries him most is a barely remembered conversation he had with Josefina in a phone booth. He keeps his distance from her and starts to feel that hunting alligators underneath the street is a break from the labor of existing above it. He learns that Fina is the, quote, spiritual leader or den mother of the Playboys, a local gang without a defined territory. On the feast of San Ercole dei Rinoceronti in Little Italy, Benny, Angel, and Geronimo flirt with a few young teenagers with sad eyes, boasting and dancing and chasing them into a dance club filled with Playboys. As Benny prepares to climb atop the pool table where one of the girls has splayed herself for him, a fight breaks out between the Playboys and the Bop Kings. Fina arrives and breaks up the brawl. She's waiting naked in Benny's bathtub bedroom when he gets home, but he refuses her offer to be her first. He begins to worry about the Playboys' intentions with her and suspects violence. Some time later, the alligator patrol is wound down by the city thanks to its own success. Benny has started talking to the remaining gators, considering his next move. Fina convinces him to interview for a job as a clerk at Outlandish Records, where she works. What do you know? He dresses up in a suit that makes him nostalgic for the Great Depression, but ducks out of the building before the interview. Benny, Angel, and Geronimo go drinking and encounter Angel and Fina's mother looking for her. The guys run off looking for Playboy hideouts and find fights going on all along one street. Winsome is hiding in the trees with microphones recording the rumble. They follow a woman scream into a brownstone and find Fina, quote, lying on an old army cot, naked, hair in a disarray, smiling. Her eyes had become hollowed as Lucille's that night on the pool table, end quote. Angel tells Benny to wait outside and starts to beat his sister. Benny bids farewell to Geronimo and heads back onto the street. A bleak chapter.
Yeah, a dark turn.
What do we make of where we begin here? Geronimo and Angel take Benny out for, as they call it, some coño, which Benny should remember as being that weird guy who was his boss when he was making salads back in the day. Sort of a what do you call that in comedy? A callback. A little bit of a callback on Pynchon's part here.
This first end of shift party seems fun, and then the rest of the chapter is not fun.
Capital NF, not fun.
Yeah, we should say that it's end of shift, which is to say that it is 5 a.m. When they start their bar crawl here, and they sort of try to find the only places that are open in all these after hours clubs, and they find enough places that Benny just gets totally plastered and doesn't exactly remember what has gone on. But he has several awkward interactions on the dance floor. He tries to explain in Italian to all of the Spanish speakers, non posso ballare. He said, no puedo bailar, she corrected him and yanked him to his feet. So he's like trying his best, as he explains to Angel and Geronimo, like what he really wants to do is go to sleep and they won't let him.
Angel and Geronimo can't stop going out for wine, and Benny's picked the wrong group to go to sleep after work.
Indeed, he has.
But
yeah,
he does something kind of relatable. He kicks off his shoes. He like tries dancing in his socks, and then he limps off to a table in the corner, crawled under it, and went to sleep. So he just goes to sleep anyways in the bar.
Yeah, there's this kind of tender image where Josefina is like leaning her head on his head at the bar because she has just gotten off work and is also really tired.
They have kind of a sweet moment there. But then later in the night, even though Benny has fallen asleep at the first bar they go to, they then carry him down the street over their head, chanting, and 2 more and more bars.
Yeah, chanting mierda, 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 or shit, shit, shit. A lot of shit coming up in these couple of chapters having to do with Benny in the sewer.
Yeah, it seems like kind of a difficult crowd to go out with. Like you just can't go home.
There's a part a little bit later on that I think characterizes a lot of this. Just a few pages later, Profane had got into this way of thinking, and along with parties in the daytime and a rotating shift system devised by Bung the foreman, whereby you didn't know till the day before which hours you would be working next, it put him on a weird calendar which was not ruled off into neat squares at all, but more into a mosaic of tilted street surfaces that changed position according to sunlight, streetlight, moonlight, nightlight. I think this is like part of that phosphorescence that you were referencing earlier, Dury, that like things are just glowing weirdly, and Benny is just sort of tossed and turned throughout these different glowing spaces of the dance floor and the street and this bathroom that he has made into his bedroom by sleeping in the tub.
Yo-yoed around,
you might say.
I thought that I liked that passage as well. I thought the mosaic of tilted street surfaces sort of reminded me once again of the mirror from when Rachel was looking in the mirror earlier, especially because earlier he talked a little bit about tallying his time in reverse, or Schlemiel's light, time on the job as escape, time exposed to any possibility of getting involved with Fina as ass-breaking wageless labor. So we have this sort of time, reverse time, kind of these reflective tilted surfaces, once again, the above street, the under the street.
Yeah, but what had he said in that phone booth? This is like really haunting to Benny. And I guess it's a question that we can ask ourselves. Is he worried that he says something that he doesn't really mean? Or is he worried that he says something that he actually really genuinely means and is afraid that someone caught him in the act of being vulnerable?
I kind of think the latter. Like, he seems really... At least my take was he seems very disconcerted by Fina because she treats him, quote, like he was a human being. He says, why did she have to behave like he was a human being? Why couldn't he be just an object of mercy? And so I feel like the fact that she sees him as sort of human is disconcerting to him, which I guess maybe connects back to our inanimacy.
Sort of, I mean, we talked about this in the first episode that Benny likes to be the guy who's sitting on the sidelines. He likes to be the voyeur. Like, I think he would really enjoy being at a different table watching this, like, group of friends be at the bar. But yeah, like, there's another quote. Soon Fina's eyes changed from sleepy to shiny from wine, and she talked less and spent more of her time smiling at Profane. That's made him uncomfortable. So him being, like, put in the spotlight is deeply unsettling to Benny.
Yeah, there's a lot of discussion of eyes in this chapter. Eyes changing, turning hollow, like you mentioned in the chapter summary. But also that quote about the eyes changing from sleepy to shiny from wine. Yeah,
I feel like that is a great description of that thing that happens when you're a little too tired to go out, but you have like a drink and a half when you're out, and suddenly, you have like a burst of energy, and like you're awake from the bar and the alcohol and the environment, and it all like comes together. And that is a temporary fix for being very tired, as Benny soon learns, but it's an elegant way of phrasing that, I think. And you're right, these eyes continue to show up and kind of haunt Benny throughout this chapter.
How old is Fina?
He's older than the Playboys, which I feel like Perts are probably around 18-ish, 18 or like sort of 17, 18, 19, I'm guessing, because I think these boys are probably a little bit older than Lucille and them, who we meet, and Lucille's 14. So if Lucille's 14, Playboys in the 15, 16, Josefina in the 17, 18, I'm thinking.
Yeah, because she's working.
Yeah, he does also have a full-time job.
Yeah, she has like a full-time job, like at a record company, not like helping out at her parents' shop or whatever, or doing odd jobs like a teenager might. She is working full time, so presumably out of high school, or at least out of high school age.
Well,
yeah, although I mean, she could have dropped out of high school.
Yeah.
But we see that it's not really an age issue. He doesn't think he's too old for Josefina.
Certainly not. I mean, I think they clearly go chasing some girls that are far too young for them, or anyone for that matter.
Yeah. So this idea of like Fina and being the sort of bringer of mercy is kind of a theme that we return to over the course of this chapter. And Benny initially starts out thinking of himself as this object of Josefina's mercy, but soon learns through her interaction with these playboys, this local gang with like they have velvet jackets with Playboy written sort of like blood red thread on the back of the velvet jacket. And they are described as like a gang where most of them live around Josefina and them in that neighborhood, but not all of them, and a lot of them just live everywhere else around the city. And so they don't, unlike a lot of their rival gangs, have a singular territory that is theirs and that they patrol and that they can claim and protect from unwanted threats, which leads to them obviously getting in a lot of fights with other gangs who see them as stepping onto their territory, which seems a little bit like a self-fulfilling prophecy. If, I don't know anything about running a street gang, but it seems like it would be especially difficult to be a gang without any defined territory.
And I think they're described as being sort of cowardly also. So just seems like the Playboys, they just seem like they just want to like mess stuff up. I'm not sure they have a coherent goal.
I did a little bit of research into this because, especially by the time we got the reference or the mention of the Bop Kings, I'd sort of call time out on Pynchon and do a
So you went and watched
Googling.
West Side Story.
No, I watched The Warriors.
Okay, yep.
Because Bob Kings is really in that same vein of goofy gang name. Playboy's a little more respectable as a gang name, I suppose, but not a lot.
Well, they have a little bit more respectable jackets as well.
They've got good jackets. So I Googled, did New York really have goofy teenage gangs? And the answer is hell yeah, they did. It seems in the post-war, I guess that's sort of like the rise of the teenager years in general.
Yeah.
There was more sort of organization with teens having less to do, and you get a lot of these like local gangs formed that just kind of were sort of in between like an actual club and then like they're not the gangs that we have in like 2025, I don't think. But there are some great goofy ass names if you guys want to hear some.
I would love to hear some.
Absolutely.
These are predominantly from a New York Public Library article. Jolly Stompers, Majesties, Socialistic Gents.
And so we should say that we are not, if your historical gang was not included on this list, we do not mean that as a slight against any names that were not included or that were included on this list, such that, it could be taken that we're making fun of them for their names.
I'm sure they were all very serious street gangs that did very serious
people,
things.
yeah.
Not to go on a tangent, but Patrick and I just watched the hit movie musical Grease,
which I'd never seen.
You'd never
I
seen
had not
Grease?
seen since I was like 13.
God, Grease is good.
And Danny's like crew, the T-Birds, kind of strikes me as maybe this type of teenage gang. Like they have matching jackets.
Yep.
They like to mess stuff up.
They're in a turf war with a different teenage gang.
That is true. That is true. And they're teens. And they had, so I was just looking back, they had a different name. So for the movie, they renamed it to the T-Birds. And Grease was originally took place in Chicago.
In the original stage version.
Yes. And in the original stage version, the gang had a different name, which I'm forgetting, but I feel like I need to find now. The Burger Palace Boys.
The Burger Palace
Wow.
Boys.
Which is also goofy. That was the original name of the gang in Greece.
I'm glad they changed it for the movie. Danny and them aren't very serious, but Burger Palace Boys?
Well, in addition to trimming every possible reference to the city of Chicago in order to transpose it into vaguely California, they had to remove the Burger Palace boys as well.
They pulled a Good Morning Miss Bliss on Grease. That's shameful.
Yeah, so we are definitely in this milieu of Grease / Rebel Without a Cause / The Warriors / pick your favorite sort of mid-century New York gangland violence fiction or real history. And in the same way, like, these gangs in the novel here are likewise sort of like racially and ethnically coded. So obviously the Playboys seem to involve a lot of like Hispanic youth, but also some of the Italian American youth in the city, whereas the Bop Kings seem predominantly to be black based on what we see of them in this chapter. So in as much as in real life and in Pynchon, like, silly names go on top of things, they're also representative of these like violent tensions at the heart of inner city communities that do turn violent by the end of the chapter in a very real way. But yeah, I can imagine Pynchon having a good time coming up with a name for this sort of thing. Or maybe he really knew a couple of the Playboys back in the day. Who knows?
Should we talk about Profane Angel and Geronimo's adventures with the young girls?
Yeah, so they go down to a neighborhood called Little Italy and Mulberry Street.
Another Dr. Seuss book.
Is it indeed?
Also for the Pynchon shelf.
What I saw on Mulberry Street, I don't know if it's the most racist Dr. Seuss book, but it's probably top 3 most racist Dr. Seuss books.
Welcome back to Seuss Pals, where we finally read the works of Dr. Seuss cover to cover in chronological order.
I feel like our Pynchon bookshelf is sort of problematic at this stage.
I think it may continue to be. So they're on Mulberry Street, no relation, for the feast of San Ercole dei Rinoceronti, which is Saint Hercules of the rhinoceroses. Not a real saint, as you might gather, but if you take the Italian and put it into English, that's where it gets you.
I was just rolling with that as a real saint.
You got to Rinoceronti and you were like,
sure.
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Why not?
Yeah, I mean, it could be a Catholic saint of rhinoceroses.
I'd believe it.
My internal pronunciation of the Italian wasn't close enough to that to pick up on the cognate there.
Yeah, there's all sorts of hubbub going on. There's food and merriment, and there's a band playing some opera classics. It is capital I Italian. There's zeppole. Another
item for the Pynchon cookbook. Much more exciting than rat liver, in my opinion.
I would much rather eat some zeppole than rat tails, boiled or otherwise.
Which are sort of like a fried dough situation?
Yeah, like they're like a filled kind of pastry thing.
And beer and sausage pepper sandwiches.
Yeah, so capital I Italian going on in Mulberry Street here. But Geronimo and Angel and Benny are doing what they usually do and looking for girls to pick up and sleep with. And they happen upon these 14-year-olds.
Described as 3 jailbait, all lipstick and shiny machined breast and buttock surfaces stood in front of the Wheel of Fortune, twitching and hollow-eyed. So I think once again we have kind of a callback to the viewing of these girls as inanimate, as surfaces, machine-like, and then also they have these sort of hollow eyes that we return to later.
And they're twitching kind of constantly, which at once feels kind of machine-like, but also feels very childlike in a really
disturbing
and unsettling way. Like they're kind of antsy, and these 3 weird guys come up to them, and Angel and Geronimo sort of shove Benny out in front and say, like, he speaks some Italian. Obviously,
Except they say that in a more derogatory way.
Yeah, they say it in a more derogatory way. The lot of derogatoryisms getting thrown around in these two chapters. And sure enough, so we know that Benny's mother is Jewish and his father is Catholic, and like he seems to have picked up some Italo-Americanisms, I think, as Pynchon calls it. So presumably his like profane on his dad's side of the family is like of Italian ancestry, or else he picked up some of this in the Navy. But with the Catholic connection, I think you can draw some lines there. And it doesn't immediately, he does not immediately endear himself to these young women.
No, he says a term that means semen, I think, from what I looked up.
Yes, sfachim.
I was hoping you would pronounce that instead of me. And they start making, like, he pretends that, or Geronimo, anyways, he starts off, he says that term, they're like, your friend has a nasty mouth, and Geronimo is like, well, that's his name, that's why he said that. And they're like, Benny Sefachim is really your name, which I thought was interesting because his last name is actually profane, and now they've replaced it with sort of a profane word.
They've replaced it with
Damn.
profanity.
Damn.
Yeah, and so he covers for himself and is like, you didn't let me finish. It's sfacimento, which the narrator clues us into. In Italian, it means destruction or decay, which is true. There's also a funny bit to reference Grant's companion to V once more. He could not find a reference to what sfachim meant, but it is the thing that comes up on Google pretty immediately now. So you can imagine how much easier sort of writing the job of writing a companion to a book is in the age of the internet, or in the age of the internet as it was before it was polluted with sort of like large language model gobbledygook.
When was the companion written?
Like in 91 or something? Like
He couldn't find like a 14-year-old Italian boy to ask what this meant. Like you couldn't
it
just find
seems
a
to
teenager.
be. I did some further digging on this when I noticed this like incongruity where he was like, scholars have speculated that this might be a local dialect, and it seems to be sort of like New York, Sicilian, Southern Italian American type stuff, that sfachim means, spunk or semen or what have you, which comes up in some puns that Pynchon makes later on. But yeah, so Benny becomes this sfachimento, meaning decay or destruction, which is the thing that he keeps sort of worrying about. His body kind of like falling apart and disintegrating.
Sort of angel of death persona.
Yeah. Meanwhile, his friends introduce themselves by other names.
Jane Ferguson and Peter O'Leary.
And Peter O'Leary is, the narrator reveals to us, like an actual friend of theirs who went to a seminary upstate and was studying to be a priest. And the narrator writes, he'd been so clean living in high school that Geronimo and his friends always used him as an alias whenever there might be any trouble. God knew how many had been deflowered, hustled off for beer, or slugged in his name. Jane Ferguson was the hero of a Western they'd been watching on the Mendoza TV the night before. And they're constantly watching these like old silent Western movies or early talking picture Western movies on TV as they go into this.
Did this remind anyone else of the movie Ricky Stanicky?
So I was just thinking about Ricky Stanicky.
They absolutely Ricky Stanicky this fool. For our listeners who...
I'm embarrassed that I have even watched that movie.
Yuri, I'm so glad that you brought that up and I didn't have to.
Yeah, for our, viewers who may not be the quite at the caliber of aesthete and cinephile to know of the film Ricky Stanicky, one of y'all want to set up what is the basis for this film? Is
that indeed the title of the film, or is that just the character? Okay.
I'm pretty sure that's also the title.
You couldn't call the movie anything else. It's about Ricky Stanicky.
It's about three friends who, growing up, have invented this ghost fourth friend, Ricky Stanicky, who they blame everything that they get in trouble on his influence. And I don't remember exactly what starts the sort of main plot of the movie, but like one of the guys' wife is about to give birth, but they have to go to New Jersey to see Ricky because something is up with Ricky, but they just want to go gamble. But then his wife
I'm reminding myself of this plot a little bit. They want to go see YouTube music sensation Mark Rebellet in concert, and so they have to make an excuse of going to see Ricky Stanicky in order to take off.
Anyway, the wife goes into labor, but they're too plastered to drive back to New York from Atlantic City. So they find a porno Weird Al played by John Cena, and they hire him to be Ricky Stanicky. And then all the people in their life love Ricky Stanicky and think he's the greatest. And so then they can't get rid of him. And that's
mayhem
kind of the whole
ensues.
They have a falling out, and then I swear to God, 75% of the runtime of this film takes place in small group scenes at a wedding or something where Ricky Stanicky shows up against the main character's will and just is charming and charms everyone there in order to shove it in their face.
The only scene I remember from this movie is when they meet him and he's on stage and when they're at the bris. Those are the only two scenes in that movie, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
I want to be clear that we all saw this movie together. We didn't just sort of independently, coincidentally see this very, not great movie. But anyways,
we were all total strangers in the theaters, and then we were the only ones there. And when we walked out, we were like, do you want to start a podcast about Thomas Pynchon? Having seen Ricky Stanicky, and it took us a year and a half to do it.
I do really feel like this whole Ricky Stanicky plot is absolutely in line with Angel Geronimo and Profane's sort of MO together. Seems like the type of stuff they would pull.
Yeah, do you think Benny Profane could be played by Zac Efron?
No. I'm going to come down on that one.
All right, sure enough. So these three weird men are inventing fake names to sleep with these 14-year-olds. Let's get back down to earth. Enough Ricky Stanicky.
Yeah, I didn't mean to throw Ricky Stanicky under the bus like that. They weren't trying to sleep with underage women.
Ricky Stanicky would never.
Girls.
Ricky Stanicky is very kind of an upstanding citizen once you get to know him.
What happens next?
There's a song.
Who is singing the song? I'm trying to recall. Does Benny sing the song?
I think he does. But wait, is this before or after he talks about being a alligator hunter? Maybe that's before they... Yeah, never mind. Alligator hunting.
Yeah, it's just before they talk about that. Well, I'll read this part because it is just before the song and talks specifically about this theme of eyes that we've been talking about. She couldn't be more than 14, but she knew already that men are drifters. Good for her. Bedmates and all this fashim they have yet to get rid of drift on, and if some stays with her and swells into a little drifter who will go someday too, why, she wouldn't like that too much, he reckoned. He wasn't angry with her. He looked that thought at her, but who knew what went on in those eyes? They seemed to absorb all the light in the street, from flames beneath sausage grills, from the bridges of light bulbs, windows of neighborhood apartments, glowing ends of de nobili cigars, flashing gold and silver of instruments on the bandstand, even light from the eyes of what innocent there were among the tourists.
Yes, we have all these different sources of light again.
Yeah, none of which are reflected in her eyes, all of which just get sort of absorbed into them, like they're hollow and empty.
Yeah, and then he sings a song about the eyes of a New York woman.
Yes, okay, that's why I couldn't figure out where who was singing. It's because he started to sing is written in brackets in the verse itself. Thank you, Thomas Pynchon, and your wondrous creativity for punctuation. Yeah, he sings a song from the Great Depression, and they're all like, that's a weird old song.
Yeah, the girls are like, it doesn't have any beat.
Wars don't have any beat. They're all noise. Then the Zeppelin Man starts singing, and suddenly everybody is singing. They're singing from, or they're playing Madame Butterfly. Speaking of cross-cultural otherings, if you go look up the plot of that opera. And then they're talking about their jobs killing alligators and
telling tall stories to girls I want to screw, Profane thought. So they're talking up the alligators. They're sort of, do they talk about the rats? Maybe they skip over that. Mostly just talk about the alligators.
But they're self-mythologizing, and Pynchon writes that they're not mythologizing about these core human fears and interests about like the thunder or like why crops keep dying after the harvest. They're mythologizing sort of like spur of the moment. They're improvising, they're puffing themselves up, and then the girls run off down the street.
Yeah, and so then a chase
Good for them.
ensues.
They should leave, these weird guys.
Definitely. Yeah, chase ensues. We also forgot to mention one of the girls is named Lucille, the one that Profane seems interested in.
They chase, well, I guess they all flee, and Geronimo sort of looks at the group and says, chase them? And then they sort of drunkenly stumble through this street festival until they go into an establishment with a sign that reads social club, beer, dancing.
Yeah, and in here the crowd is a little different. The boys were, this quote, the boys were Ivy League suits, the girls wore cocktail dresses, there was rock and roll on the jukebox, the greasy heads and cantilever brassiers were still there, but the atmosphere was refined, like a country club dance.
Is it giving Grease, the hit movie musical?
In a particularly sort of like Hispanic and Italian way, yes it is.
I mean, I feel like the original Grease
This is what they were going for.
Was quite Italian.
Yeah, except they're not like leather clad greasers so much. They're sort of like faux or actually preppy. They've got their velvet jackets, which in a funny scene, Benny is like looking around and sort of like sees the coat room through the corner of his eye and notices that it's just full of Playboy's jackets. Which I think is a really, really funny visual to imagine, where he's just like, oh, this is a weird vibe. And then he's like, oh, no.
Yeah, they've all got these iconic jackets. And as soon as they get into this clubhouse, they take them off and they're just wearing their sort of normal preppy streetwear. Like they're all in jackets and khaki pants. And yeah, it takes Profane a minute to figure out kind of what he's gotten himself into.
I thought it was kind of funny that Profane thinks, this thought occurs to him, he thinks Playboy country. But they have no country. Like they're by description, they have no territory. So is there like country just where they are is Playboy country?
This
I think
one
that's
building is Playboy country.
Wherever the Playboys are, that's Playboy country. I think that's exactly right.
Do you think Profane still has his like cowboy hat on at this point?
It's still, but yeah, it's in March. We should mention. So the feast of Hercules of the Rhinoceros is on the Ides of March. So it's still probably pretty cold. I bet he's wearing a hat. So he follows Lucille, whose name we should, speaking of these hollowed eyes and them absorbing light.
Can I explain my patron saint?
Please
Lucille
do.
is a name I hold.
I didn't mean to saint-splain you.
Yes, Saint Lucy is had her eyes cut out. And is depicted carrying her eyes on a plate, her severed eyes on a plate.
Yeah, one of the more graphic saints.
Quite.
Up there with is it Saint Jerome, who was flayed and carries around his skin?
I couldn't say for
Maybe.
certain.
Yeah, Lucille, also like etymologically related to like light. And as we're talking about light and eyes.
Indeed. So yeah, the hollow eyes, I hadn't put that together despite her being my patron saint. The hollow eyes make sense.
So Profane sort of chases her into one of the back rooms where there's a pool table and she sets herself up on top of it. And we once again get this really, really weird instance of a person being the difference between person and thing sort of totally eliding.
She sort of blurs into the table. Her fringed eyes seemed part of the felt.
Mm-hmm. And then Benny feels it was as if he were looking through her face to the surface of the table, skirt raised, mouth open, teeth all white, sharp, ready to sink into whatever soft part of him that got close. Oh, she would surely haunt him.
Call back to ploy once again.
Call back to ploy, call back to the alligators, like this sort of weird green shape with sharp teeth. That is feels like a haunting danger to him.
And then he starts to climb up onto the pool table, presumably to have sex with her, which was just
he's unzipping
He
his
unzips
fly.
his fly.
yeah. I mean, but like he's in the middle of a bar, is he not?
I think he's technically in the more towards the back.
Yeah, I think Lucille was beckoning Profane from a doorway across the dance floor. So I think there's kind of like a pool room in the back. And then there's a dance floor up front. I mean, it's still not great, but there's
for many reasons, not great.
Yes.
Yep.
We can all agree this is problematic of one Benny Profane. Living up to his name, once again. Until there's like screaming and jukebox, the jukebox sort of goes out. Someone knocks it over.
He gets like knocked over, is like sort of on the ground, like eye to eye with an 8-ball.
Yeah, he falls down and literally, once again, kind of like a Looney Tunes cartoon, like all of the pool balls sort of like knock one by one on top of him as he's laying there on the ground. Very cartoonish, slapstick, vaudevillian once again. And this is where we meet the Bop Kings outside, where there's a big fight going on.
A rumble.
Until Saint Fina of the Playboys breaks up the fight.
Yeah, so can we talk a little bit about Fina's relationship with the Playboys?
I'd love to.
Let's do it.
What's Fina's relationship to the Playboys?
What indeed?
She pictures herself as kind of like, or Benny imagines her picturing herself as kind of like a Joan of Arc figure, where she is like a holy, blessed
saint,
virginal saint who is there to inspire and rally. And of course, the irony here is that Joan of Arc also led a bunch of people into war and conflict, but Fina's role tends to be, as far as Benny can tell, sort of defusing rumbles.
How do you think she got into this role?
Yeah, because Angel and Geronimo and like none of her immediate familial connections seem closely related to the Playboys, but it does say that a lot of the Playboys are in her neighborhood. So she probably grew up around a lot of these kids.
Yeah, do you think like they elevated her to this status, or did she kind of play a role in elevating herself to this sort of saint-like status?
I feel like she's kind of into that role because, I mean, she comes in to break up this fight, right? Like she walks,
she hears something's going down
and like comes over to break it up. So she knows that she is at least in this role and is acting specifically for it, not just as like a passive participant.
Yeah, it describes her as hovering over the sudden peace she'd created, beaming, serene. So she does, I guess, seem to kind of enjoy this peacemaker, saint-like role.
I think there's also a little bit of a textual clue here into this role. So Profane / the narrator is describing this in like highly vaulted sort of religious iconography and like imagining cherubs and Fina floating down on a brilliant mauve cloud and this chorus of a boys' choir. And specifically the thing that the boys' choir is singing is O Salutaris Hostia, which is a Latin Eucharistic hymn by Thomas Aquinas, which literally translates to O Saving Victim. So it's the O Saving Victim opening wide the gate of heaven to man below. So you have this victim, Christ, who also saves by opening the door to the debauched humanity into the kingdom. And so this is, at the very least, how Profane is thinking of Fina's position here. Is she is or will become a victim, even though she has this responsibility to bring salvation in some way, or mercy.
Yeah, and Benny kind of originally paints this sort of like Madonna horror visual of Fina as like, how long could Fina herself hold out? The minute her horny boys caught a glimpse of the wanton behind the saint, the black lace slip beneath the surplice, he worries that Fina is going to be sort of sexually assaulted by her playboys.
Yeah, and she was overdue now, is what he concludes. that this is the unavoidable end of what she is doing. And then she's waiting for him when he gets home in the bathtub. So Benny has been sleeping in the bathtub this whole time, sort of has a mattress, but he puts it in the bathtub to go to sleep every night. Except this evening when he gets home, Fina is waiting in the nude, in the dry bathtub, no water, no clothes, just Fina, Pynchon writes.
Yeah, and Profane is supremely uncomfortable with this. He turns her down, says, now hop out of there, I want to go to sleep.
She is offering, she says, Benny, I'm Cherry, I want it to be you. Benny rejects that proposal, but then feels that if it was not going to be him, then this is where he really starts to worry about sort of Fina's relationship to this teenage gang, to which she has become vulnerable.
Yeah, and he kind of self-deprecates himself into this mode. He thinks well, maybe it is plausible that she wants it to be me, and then looks in the mirror and sees fat pig pouches around the eyes. Why did she want it to be him?
And he suggests that instead she save herself for marriage, and she rejects that idea, saying, who wants to get married? And then
a theme we also see in the film Grease.
Did Thomas Pynchon write Grease?
In all the grand theories of who Thomas Pynchon is, I don't know that any one of them came up with Grease. Although he did write little opera librettos and stuff as a younger writer, none of which I think were ever published.
Yeah, we've just been watching sort of unrelated movies from the 1950s to get in the spiritual mindset of 1956.
Or watching movies made in the late 70s about the 1950s that parody certain elements of the 50s. Yeah, there's a really disquieting sentence that I think, in as much as Pynchon is really good at doing these subtle transitions between characters and all these light, airy moments of beauty, and also these tricky, intricate plays with language, sometimes he hits you with a sentence like, Profane's worries about Fina turned real and ugly soon enough, which is just hits you like a brick. And the rest of this chapter kind of ratchets up this tension of what exactly, is meant by that statement, even though sort of perfectly well what that is going to mean.
Yeah, and so the next section of this chapter starts with Profane having a little chit-chat with the alligators.
He goes on a real
spiral, some might say.
Yeah. I mean, it goes directly back to our sort of animate versus inanimate. I mean, these alligators are, I'd say an alligator can get drunk. So thus has a
like
soul.
the elephants. Yeah, there we go.
But he gets very anti-consumerist with them, I guess, talking about them. Well, they're sold at Macy's. I think he mentions them being turned into leather, maybe. Their bones being gnawed into exquisite rococo by rat artisans after they've been shot in the sewer.
Yeah, and how as babies they knew they'd only be another consumer object.
Yeah, alongside the wallets and pocketbooks of what might have been their parents or kin. So it's he communes with them in the sense of giving them a kind of mercy, which is that they have nowhere to go in the world. They're not sort of proper alligators because they live in a place that alligators shouldn't be. And at their very origin, they were living consumer products that were sold at Macy's. So
now they're in the sewer with all of the junk of the world's Macy's.
Meanwhile, things have gotten really awkward with Fina. And she's trying to sort of snap Benny out of it again, extending this kind of infinite grace, and is well, I think I could get you a job as a clerk at Outlandish Records, which we're sort of the red string cork board is adding another couple of strings at this point as we move through the novel.
Benny keeps getting closer to the whole sick crew. I mean, in the very first chapter, we talk about him being a yo-yo and how Rachel is the hand that is controlling the yo-yo. And he's still on the string, but he's not back in the hand yet, but he's getting real close. He's sort of circling the drain of just like he keeps having these tangential run-ins with whole sick crew members, and he won't just go over to Rachel's house. We know he knows he has, or he doesn't have the address anymore. He had the address. He could figure it out.
Yes, absolutely. There's a really sad line, a schlemiel's a schlemiel. What can you make out of one? What can one make out of himself? You reach a point, and Profane knew he'd reached it, where you know how much you can and cannot do. But every now and again, he got attacks of acute optimism. I mean, he's clearly someone who is very down on himself.
Very down on himself. It
is also hard to read this and not feel pity towards Benny Profane.
Well, that's what he wants to be. Like, he wanted Fina to see him as an object of mercy.
Yeah.
Or an object of pity. He pities himself. He wants other people to pity him. He feels very uncomfortable when people see him as a human and not just something to be pitied.
Yeah, it's a really good example of sort of the narration reinforcing and reflecting a character's kind of self-perception. I think Pynchon has done that a lot with Benny and to some extent with Rachel as well.
And so he has one of these attacks of optimism and decides he agrees to like interview for this position. Fina tells him to find a suit, and he borrows this like Depression era suit from
Angel's father,
Mr. Mendoza.
Mr. Mendoza.
Because he'd been wearing Angel's suit, but Mrs. Mendoza's cooking had fattened him up a bit.
Yeah, and there's another interesting passage about animacy and inanimacy in relationship to this suit. He says, on the way downtown on the subway, he decided that we suffer from great temporal homesickness for the decade we were born in, because he felt now as if he were living in some private depression days. The suit, the job with the city that would not exist after 2 weeks more at the most. All around him were people in new suits, millions of inanimate objects being produced brand new every week, new cars in the streets, houses going up by the thousands all over the suburbs he had left months ago. Where was the depression?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is something that Pynchon is reflecting on a lot in this chapter, which is there is this post-war economic boom. You know, there's the new cars, there's the suburbanization, there's, white flight from the cities. There is all of this economic prosperity. And yet, you know, in a physical sense, there's every action has an equal and equivalent reaction. This implies that there are people left behind by that boom. This implies that there are people whose houses are getting overpasses built over them, or who are not able to find these upwardly mobile jobs, or who give and give and give and then are taken advantage of by the systems that they grew up in. And it is as if Pynchon is saying, from Benny's perspective, like, the depression ended, but also the depression never ended. It remains in the country, sort of suffusing it even where you can't necessarily see it.
Yeah, I guess I didn't finish that passage. He says, where was the depression? And then the next sentence says, in the sphere of Benny Profane's guts and in the sphere of his skull, concealed optimistically by a tight blue serge coat and a schlemiel's hopeful face. So the depression isn't visible outwardly in the world at large, but it's sort of embedded in him.
In him and in like all of the other bums, quote unquote, who were showing up to go hunt alligators in the sewer.
Yeah.
It's his temporal homesickness.
Do y'all feel a temporal homesickness for the 1990s?
Yes.
I thought a lot about this, and I think everyone has a homesickness for the 1990s. So I think we're like the worst people to ask. We need to find someone from the 80s.
Yeah.
Because everyone is like, yeah, that the opening scene of The Matrix is the best time to have been alive. And I think we're just sort of so biased towards positive views of the 1990s. It's impossible for us to answer that question.
That's probably true. It's different to have a temporal homesickness for the 1930s, probably, than the 1990s.
Yeah, well, I think it's, the 1990s has that peculiar sort of end of history thing going on with the fall of the Soviet Union and Francis Fukuyama making the sort of infamous statement that in recent days, not to date this podcast, he has recently walked back and said, like, I don't know, maybe history started again, of the superiority of sort of the neoliberal world order over the forces of communism. Yeah, I do think the 30s is a different kind of nostalgia for a nadir of a world order, or sort of for a passing of one world order to another.
So write in to Pynchon Pals if you feel a temporal homesickness towards your decade of birth.
Unless it's the 90s, pynchonpals@gmail.com.
Yeah, I feel it's quite possible we might get a lot of people born in the 90s listening to this podcast, but prove me wrong.
I know at least a few listeners who were not born in the 90s.
Thomas Pynchon. It's for 90s kids. We get the wind again as Benny is leaving. He doesn't go through with the interview because he feels too bad about himself. He just sort of gets up on the elevator, goes back down the elevator.
Not until
Yo-yo.
he leaves after he has a staring contest with a janitor. And
Yep.
sentence, looking for the sentence. But there was a little half smile and a kind of half telepathy. And it was as if this messenger had brought a message to Profane 2, sheathed to everybody but the two of them in an envelope of eye beams touching that said, "Who are you trying to kid?" Going back to the eye imagery. And I'm sorry I called him a janitor. He's a messenger.
Listen to the Wind is what concludes that, which brought me back to our ending of the chapter on McClintock's fear, that the wind was blowing outside, and also this Pentecostal wind that keeps coming up again and again. So what is Benny to do but go out drinking with Angel and Geronimo after one of their final shifts? Zeitzus is sort of almost crying, telling people that they're sort of being cut back to maybe 1 or 2 shifts a week, mostly in Brooklyn. They've ironically done a really good job at cleaning up all of the alligators, and so basically have nothing to do. And so Angel and Benny and Geronimo go out.
And it's not a good night.
It's not a good night.
It's night.
Rarely a good night with them, but this one is an especially bad night.
Particularly bad night.
Yeah.
They go to a bar and see these waves of working girls, sex workers coming in. Some of them clearly having made some money that evening, others not so much. Benny sort of like closely watches their eyes and facial expressions. And then they meet Mrs. Mendoza outside, who really forebodingly is like, "Have you seen your sister anywhere?"
Yeah, and so then they go looking for Fina. They find a rumble going on, a lot of fights going on a particular street.
Like a lot of fights. They talk about hearing, they're sort of in the middle of a fight, and then they hear another fight going on up towards the north end of the street as well. And Winsome is there, just hanging out in a tree with some microphones and recording the brawl.
As he does. I'm really glad you clarified that about what type of record company he runs, because it was not all clicking into place for me as to why he was just dangling these microphones around in random places.
Yeah, I guess I should clarify. There's a sound man in a nearby tree dangling microphones, but Winsome himself is in a tweed suit hiding behind a new Lincoln, so he has not actually climbed into the tree himself.
Yeah, and Angel, in perhaps a understandable state of disbelief, is like, "My sister's boss?"
Believe momentarily that it might be Fina who's up in the tree on the job, I guess.
But it is not. They hear a woman scream out in the distance, and then they're looking around. Again, we get this loose understanding of the Playboy territory where they're like looking for a house with Playboy tags on it, basically, that has some chalk symbols on it, because they think they're in the right part of town, but because there is no discrete Playboy territory, they're looking for, one particular house, basically, whereupon they kick inside. The police are charging in, and then this is where Profane looks through a door that is cracked open and sees Fina. I will just read the section again. Angel opened a door at the end of the hall, and for a half second, Profane saw Fina through it, lying on an old army cot, naked, hair in disarray, smiling. Her eyes had become hollowed as Lucille's that night on the pool table. Angel turned and showed all his teeth. "Don't come in," he said. "Wait." The door closed behind him, and soon they heard him hitting her. It's a dark place Benny has gotten to by the end of this.
Yeah, and Benny, in maybe not his most heroic move, just turns around and leaves.
Yeah, and a very Benny-like move.
Yeah, it would require him to be a main character for him to do something to stop this from happening, but he's a voyeur, so he just like heads off into the night. What I wanted to say, I guess to add to the bleakness, is that when they meet Mrs. Mendoza, Kook is also there. Kind of forgot about Kook until he shows back up in this one paragraph, but he comes with a message saying that Fina had spoken to Dolores earlier, and Dolores described Fina as sounding funny, which I assume means she's also been drugged. That's at least what I took from it.
Yeah. I mean, I think there are a myriad of interpretations to this scene, none of them especially great. And I think the thing that's especially haunting about it to me is the smile on her face, or at least what Benny perceives to be a smile on her face. Clearly, this is not what she wanted to happen in sort of like sound mind. And Pynchon sort of leaves it up to the reader's imagination exactly what transpired here. None of it good.
Yeah, and so I think... Oh, go ahead, Andrew.
Not a gardener.
I was just going to say this is kind of the end of Benny's relationship with this particular crew. He decides he won't go back to the Mendozas. Probably a good call after all that has transpired. And kind of concludes that the alligators are gone. There's no more work under the street. And so he is returning to the surface, as Pynchon says, the dream street. And so he goes back to the subway and is looking for a new place to sleep.
Yeah. That's a bleak note to end a podcast on. Takeaways from these two chapters, perhaps in the context of the book. I feel like there's obviously been a lot of violence in a variety of ways throughout the book here, sort of physically in the rhinoplasty scene, but also historically in a lot of the sort of colonialist implications of chapter 3 with Stencil's impersonations. But this definitely feels like a more grounded scene of like particularly sexual violence than what we've encountered before. And yet, true to Pynchon's technique, we get there through these extremely silly digressions about like priests going and preaching to rats that are then tinged with darkness themselves as the priest molests the rats as he is teaching them the Gospels. Yeah, I this is a I wouldn't say my absolute favorite chapters in the book thus far, but I will be intrigued to see what function they serve in the rest of the novel going forward, I would say.
I think these two chapters, very plot driven in a way that not all of the chapters we've read have been. I'm still waiting, I guess, for when Profane and Stencil, or Profane and the whole sick crew, have a more concrete run-in with each other. And I think losing Angel and Geronimo is sort of the cast of side characters. We've now seen Benny sort of run through his Navy friends and then his New York City Angel and Geronimo friends. I'm guessing that means the next time we see Benny, we're going to get another set of minor characters who do kooky things. So I'm excited to see where that goes.
That, or he ends up with the whole sick crew next. Yeah, I'm curious to see like why Benny has gone on this journey, this sort of side plot of the alligator hunting, ingratiating himself into this family, going on these drunken escapades, and then having this witnessing this really violent situation with Fina, who he clearly cared for. Like he had feelings for Fina. he felt he felt seen by her in a way that like made him feel uncomfortable. But then for their relationship to end like this is really disturbing.
Yeah, this is the second time we've seen Benny purposefully choose to not be happy, because he could have hooked up with Fina and like started dating her or whatever, and then this would not have happened. He could have, when he first got to New York, go join Rachel and her friends and have a newfound family and a little bit of permanence. And instead he keeps kicking the can on it and like actively picking a route that leads him in, I guess, not always straight into more suffering, but at least into more just like wandering and like loneliness.
Yeah, like he had a chance also at like kind of a much nicer job than the alligator hunting, but also self-sabotages there.
Yeah, I wonder, the thing that I feel like we don't have a lot of insight on with Benny is, other than a couple of characters like Pig Bodine, we don't really know what Benny's deal was in the Navy. He talks about, his old tin can in like the very first couple of pages. And he talks about, going to the sailor's grave where his old crew used to hang out. But Andrew, you mentioned Salinger in a very sort of Salinger-esque way. There does seem to be this kind of war-torn devastation that has been wrought on this guy that we don't necessarily have context for. And maybe we won't get that. Maybe that is, like a lot of Salinger characters, kind of implied more than it is shown. But it feels like that is a gap that has not been filled yet by the text. And I'm curious if that will be filled.
Yeah, what messed Benny up so much?
Because even when he encounters Rachel Owlglass, it is after he's left the Navy. So perhaps we shall see. Who hurt Benny?
We shall see as we return to the above street.
The Dream Street, yeah.
The Dream Street.
I got to brush up on my sort of like Freudian psychology to get all of the sort of conscious, unconscious, ego, superego, id, the Dream Street and the Real Street.
Let's table that for the next podcast, because boy, is some Freudian psychology going to come up.
I was out on a walk recently and found a copy of Dora just on a table outside of a Catholic church. I picked that up. Maybe I'll have that read by the next podcast. We'll have all kinds of insights.
All kinds of insights about what we're reading on the next for the next episode, which is
what is
just
it, Patrick?
Chapter 7. It's just Chapter 7. It is the longest chapter in the book, I believe. So we are devoting one whole episode to Chapter 7. She hangs on the Western Wall. So go ahead and read that for next time. Let's see what else is there to say here. Not much, I guess, other than to say thank you for listening once again to the third episode of Pynchon Pals. Thank you to Andrew Tillett.
You, Patrick.
And Dury Long.
Thank you very much
for joining me. If you like what we are doing here, we'd love it if you left us a review on Apple Podcasts or on your podcatcher of choice. I will say this is the first thing that we've recorded since releasing the first episode kind of out into the wild. And we have been really, really pleased with the response that we have gotten thus far. We've gotten some very nice 5-star reviews. We've gotten a couple of written reviews that have been great. The folks on r/Thomas Pynchon were very welcoming. So shout out to y'all. And we hope that y'all continue to like the stuff that we're doing here. Listen along, tell your friends. We're not paying for advertisements for this show, so word of mouth is super important. Reviews are super important as getting the metrics up. Helps podcasts grow exponentially. If you would like to get in touch with the show or submit a question to be answered on air, currently I'm looking through our inbox and I realize, again, we sort of just posted the first episode, but there's no questions in there, and we would like to talk about your questions. You can reach us at pynchonpals@gmail.com. Our theme music is Horology by the inimitable King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, released under a Creative Commons Attribution No Derivatives license on the album Polygon Dwanaland. Pynchon Pals is produced and edited by me, Patrick Fiorilli. You can find more of my work alongside my newsletter, Critical Theory Craft, at my website, www.patf.io. And the closing of the podcast, which circles back to themes we've discussed over the course of this episode and ties a nice bow on things, is sort of like a handoff, you would call that in an improv context.
Keep your eyes out. Something. There's got to be something there. Something is.
We're coming up with the handoff.
Keep your eyes out for the next one.
Keep your eyes peeled.
Pynchon Pals.
Keep your eyes peeled, I think, is the expression.
Keep your eyes peeled.
See you later, alligator.
Oh, that's perfect.
God, Terry, you're the best.
Hell yes. See you later, alligators. Oh,
Terry, that rules. Thank
good.
you.
Good.
That just came to me.
Good
Came to me in the
podcast, y'all.
moment.
Me and Patrick absolutely spinning our wheels.